Chapter 2341. There were only 7 absolutes in the 7 absolute sect. Duanling Tian was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the leader of the 7 absolute sect. Apart from him, there were only 6 absolutes left. Amongst the current generation successors of the 6 absolutes, apart from the mysterious and unfathomable second absolute, the Heaven's secret progeny, Duanling Tian knew all of the other 6 successors of the 5 absolutes. Moreover, they were all people he was familiar with. This is too much of a coincidence. No? Even if it's a coincidence, it can't be this coincidental. Why do I suddenly feel like this 7 absolute sect is owned by my family? Everyone inside is familiar with each other and they're all on the same side. It's as if the successors of each absolutes have been decided by each of us. Duanling Tian was still in a daze when he thought about this. This was too much of a coincidence, right? How could there be such a coincidence in this world? It did not matter if the others believed it or not. Duanling Tian found it hard to believe. Father, what are you thinking about? Why are you ignoring Xiling? When Duanling Tian regained his senses, his daughter, Duan Xiling's voice rang in his ears, causing him to regain his senses. It's nothing. I'm just thinking about some friends. Duanling Tian said with a smile as he patted Duan Xiling's head. However, a hint of fear could be seen in the depths of his eyes. At this moment, Duanling Tian and his 3 daughters were in a bustling city in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. They were sitting in a room near the main hall of the busiest restaurant in the bustling city. Duanling Tian had learned about this from the customers in the main hall of the restaurant. The 7 absolute sect has reappeared? When Ganru Yen heard the customers outside mentioning the 7 absolute sect, she could not help but feel shocked. As the direct disciple of the guardian of Zoroastrianism, it was only natural that she knew more about the 7 absolute sect than ordinary people. It was a powerful sect that once stood at the peak of the Dao Martial Saint Land. During the era when the number 1 sword cultivator, Feng Qingyang, was in the Dao Martial Saint Land, that sect suppressed the 3 great sects, including the Zoroastrianism, to the point they could not even lift their heads. If it was not for the fact that the sword Saint Feng Qingyang did not have the intention to annihilate the 3 great sects during that era, it would have been difficult for the 3 great sects to resist Feng Qingyang even if they joined forces. In fact, Feng Qingyang was widely acknowledged as the strongest sword cultivator in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land. The number 1 swordsman in history, what kind of honor was that? The appearance of the 7 absolute sect. The disciples of the 7 absolute sect are all outstanding talents. Especially the few female disciples of the 7 absolute sect. Each of them is like a pearl that attracted the attention of the entire upper province. Ganru Yen did not know when, but a hint of shame could be seen in the depth of her eyes. As the youngest female disciple of the Zoroastrianism prodigy, Ganru Yen had always been proud of her achievements. However, after learning about the deeds of the few female disciples from the 7 absolute sect a few years ago, this was the first time she truly understood what it meant by, "There's always someone better than you out there." In front of the female disciples of the 7 absolute sect, she was completely overshadowed. There was no glory to speak of. However, with my current innate spiritual root, my cultivation base will definitely improve by leaps and bounds when I return to the upper province. I'll be able to catch up to them sooner or later. The moment Ganru Yen thought of this, the sense of inferiority in the depths of her eyes disappeared and was replaced by a look of confidence. Her biggest source of confidence was her innate spiritual root. It was a dark violet innate spiritual root. When she was still in the lower province, with the help of her dark violet innate spiritual root, her cultivation speed was already faster than when she was in the upper province. It should be noted that the cultivation environment in the lower province could not be compared to the upper province at all. The reason her cultivation speed in the lower province was faster than when she was in the upper province was because of this. After she returned to the lower province, her innate spiritual root had transformed into a dark violet innate spiritual root with Duanling Tian's help. Now that she had returned to the upper province, it was only natural for her to find out. From this day onwards, her cultivation speed would definitely soar by an extremely exaggerated amount compared to before. The sword saint of the 7 absolute sect, Feng Qingyang. At the same time, Kerr finally regained her senses from the discussion in the restaurant. She immediately looked at Duanling Tian and asked through voice transmission, "Brother Tian, isn't Senior Feng Qingyang the person who left you the legacy of the Sovereign Heart Sword?" As a woman whom Duanling Tian was willing to sacrifice his life for, there were many things that Duanling Tian had told Kerr. For this reason, Kerr knew Duanling Tian had obtained the legacy of the Sovereign Heart Sword. She also knew the person who left the legacy behind was the sword saint Feng Qingyang, who was also her man's master. Yes. Upon hearing Ker's question through voice transmission, Duan Tian immediately replied through voice transmission. The first absolute of the seven absolute sect, the Fog Rain successor, is indeed Senior Feng Qingyang who left me the legacy of the Sovereign Heart Sword. I remember when I obtained the legacy left behind by Senior Feng Qingyang, I became the new Fog Rain successor as well. However, at that time, I didn't know what the Fog Rain successor meant. I didn't know the relationship between the Fog Rain successor and the Seven Absolute sect at all. I didn't even know the Seven Absolute sect existed. After replying through voice transmission, Duan Tian could not help but sigh. So that's how it is. Upon hearing Duan Tian's reply through voice transmission, realization dawned on Ker. She continued to say through voice transmission, "In that case, Brother Tian, you must have only just found out that you've become the sect leader of an ancient sect with a long history." Yes. Duan Tian replied through voice transmission. He could not help but smile wryly. I didn't expect there would be such a huge trap waiting for me after I obtained Senior Feng Qingyang's legacy. The sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect was not only an honor, but it was also a responsibility. Back then, when Feng Qingyang was still around, the Seven Absolute sect had suppressed the three great sects so much that they could not even lift their heads. When Feng Qingyang ascended, most of the successors of the Absolutes in the Seven Absolute sect had ascended as well. Due to that, the Seven Absolute sect was faced with a shortage of successors. Due to that, the three great sects launched a counterattack on them, causing them to suffer heavy losses. They were almost annihilated at one point. This was also the reason the Seven Absolute sect had almost disappeared from the Dao Martial Saint land. The three great sects would send out powerhouses to annihilate anyone who obtained information about the Seven Absolute sect. They wanted to completely annihilate the Seven Absolute sect to avenge their humiliation. Apart from wanting to avenge their humiliation, they were also worried that another monstrous genius like Feng Qingyang would appear in the Seven Absolute sect and lead the Seven Absolute sect to a new height of glory, suppressing the three great sects again. For this reason, countless people from the Seven Absolute sect had died in the hands of the three great sections. I've accepted the Sovereign Heart Sword's legacy left behind by Senior Feng Qingyang and become the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Although I accepted the legacy without knowing anything about the Seven Absolute sect, it also means I've accepted the responsibility of being the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Since he had accepted the legacy left behind by the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang and became the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, naturally Duan Tian did not plan to ignore his responsibilities as the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Now that I'm the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, I'm also the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. As the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, I'll have to settle the score with the three great sects. The moment Duan Tian thought of this, his eyes gleamed coldly as though he was about to devour someone. Although the cold gleam in Duan Tian's eyes was not directed at the three women in the room, they could not help but feel chills running up their spines when they saw Duan Tian's gaze from the side. The entire room fell silent immediately. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the floor. What a coincidence. I've returned to the upper province to look for Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to avenge Hua Lao. I'll start with Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to repay the blood debt the three great sects owe the Seven Absolute sect. The flames of hatred in Duan Tian's eyes intensified. He had decided to do something for the Seven Absolute sect before he ascended to the Devata realm. He wanted to annihilate the three great sects. As the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, and the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, it was his duty. Let's return to Zoroastrianism. At the same time, Duan Tian stood up hastily and said to the three women. Since they could sense Duan Tian's anxiousness, the three women did not say anything. They immediately stood up and left the room with Duan Tian. They walked through the lobby and out of the restaurant. They were about to leave. When Duan Tian and the others walked past the bustling main hall, many people's eyes were on Ker and Gan Ruyen. This was because the two women were too dazzling. A peerless face and a perfect figure. The moment she appeared, it seemed to cause everything around her to be overshadowed by her. Most importantly, the two women looked exactly the same. Two peerless beauties who looked exactly the same, but had different temperaments. No matter where they went, they would always be an eye-catching scenery. When Duan Tian sensed the unbridled gazes that were directed at him, he could not help but stop in his tracks. He snorted coldly. This cold snort seemed to be flat, Yet when it entered into the ears of all the customers in the restaurant, it was like a thunderclap that shocked them to the point their souls trembled. Chapter 2342. His cold aura swept out, causing everyone in the restaurant to feel as though their hearts and souls had been frozen. This was especially true for the male customers who were looking at Kerr and Ganru Yen. They felt the cold aura even more keenly. They hurriedly retracted their unbridled gazes. After retracting their gazes, they instinctively turned to look at the purple-clad figure walking in front of them. The purple-clad figure was tall and had long hair that fluttered in the wind. However, the cold aura he exuded seemed to be able to freeze the air. At this moment, the entire restaurant fell silent. It was only when the purple-clad young man led the group of 4 out of the restaurant that the customers in the restaurant regained their senses. When they came back to their senses, their faces were filled with relief as if they had just survived a calamity. How terrifying. That purple-clad young man is too terrifying. That's right. He didn't even look at us. Just the cold aura that emanated from his body made me feel as if my heart had been frozen. At that moment, I almost couldn't feel my own heartbeat. I feel the same way. Not only did I feel as though my heart had been frozen, but I also felt as though my soul had been frozen as well. At that moment, my consciousness seemed to have become blurry. I even felt as though I was about to die. What kind of powerhouse is that purple-clad young man? Just the cold aura he exuded was already so terrifying. If he makes a move, how earth-shattering would it be? After Duan Lingtian led Kerr, Duan Si Ling and Ganru Yen out of the restaurant, the customers in the restaurant could not help but discuss among themselves. Most of them had a look of relief on their faces. At the same time, a thunderous voice suddenly resonated from outside the restaurant. "Brat, it's your daughter's fortune that my master has taken a liking to her innate talent. If you're smart, quickly ask your daughter to kowtow and acknowledge my master as her master." This cold shout was filled with the smell of gunpowder, and it instantly attracted the attention of the customers in the restaurant. After a short while, some of the customers began to leave the restaurant to watch the commotion. Naturally, most of the customers continued to stay in the restaurant and did not join in the commotion. It's that purple-clad young man. Someone has taken a liking to his daughter. That young girl who's about 12 or 13 years old is actually his daughter. That young girl looks very similar to that pair of beautiful women. It seems like that pair of beautiful women are his wives. He's a winner in life. Regardless of whether he's a winner in life or not, he seems to have encountered some trouble. Amidst the clamor, the remaining customers in the restaurant's lobby paid their bills and left the restaurant one after another, arriving outside the restaurant. Soon, outside the entrance of the restaurant, they saw the group of people who had just passed by the restaurant's lobby. There was a purple-clothed youth, a pair of peerlessly beautiful twin sisters, and a peerlessly beautiful young girl. She was leaning against the purple-clad young man and said, "Father, they're so annoying." The young girl was referring to was a group of 3 people standing opposite them. The group of 3 people was led by a skinny old man. The old man had white hair and white eyebrows. He wore a brocade robe that accentuated his extraordinary temperament. With just a glance, one could tell he was not an ordinary person. Behind him stood 2 plainly dressed middle-aged men. One of the middle-aged men was skinny and stood there like a bamboo pole. The other middle-aged man was tall and sturdy. He took a step forward and stared at Duan Lingtian with his huge eyes. Waves of aura swept out from his body, trying to oppress Duan Lingtian. The cold shout that was filled with the smell of gunpowder earlier was also from this person. What's going on? I don't know. I just came out as well. It seems like the old man in brocade robes took a fancy to the young girl next to the purple-clad young man and wanted to take her as his disciple. However, the purple-clad young man rejected him. The young girl next to the purple-clad young man is his daughter. According to the young girl, it's enough that she has her father to teach her. She doesn't need any teacher or master. At the same time, the group of people who came out to join in the fun also realized what was going on. Scram. Duan Lingtian's expression darkened when he heard the burly middle-aged man's cold shout. He glanced at the other party coldly and spoke indifferently. He had intended to rush back to Zoroastrianism. However, he did not expect to be stopped as soon as he stepped out of the restaurant. It was fine if he was stopped by someone. After all, the other party had taken a fancy to his daughter's innate talent and wanted to take his daughter as his disciple. It was understandable. As the saying went, everyone has the heart to love talent. However, what infuriated him was this. After he expressed that he was not interested in his daughter becoming the other party's disciple, the other party's servant actually threatened him. Whoosh! When the old man in brocade robes heard Duan Tian telling him to scram, his calm expression changed. The burly middle-aged man behind him looked at Duan Tian as though he had just seen a ghost. Boy, you dare to tell me to scram? Do you know with my strength, it's as easy as killing a chicken for me to kill you? When the burly middle-aged man reached the end of his sentence, his voice turned colder and colder. When the burly middle-aged man's words spread, the people in the surroundings felt as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. A mere cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage dares to say it's as easy as killing a chicken for him? Duan Tian sneered. In the next instant, Duan Tian's figure flashed before the crowd could even react to the situation. Whoosh. In the next moment, Duan Tian had already appeared in front of the burly middle-aged man like a ghost. He stretched out his hand like an iron clamp, and before the burly middle-aged man could even react, Duan Tian had already grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Duan Tian was about the same height as the burly middle-aged man, but he was slightly slimmer. However, when Duan Tian grabbed the burly middle-aged man's neck and lifted him off the ground, it did not look right. 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage? The purple-clad young man said the burly middle-aged man is at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. How's that possible? A cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage is a force to be reckoned with in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Not only that, but the burly middle-aged man is only a servant of the finely dressed old man. I think it's impossible as well. I think the purple-clad young man wants to use the burly middle-aged man to show off his strength. That's why he said the burly middle-aged man's cultivation base is at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. That's possible. Although Duan Tian said the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, no one believed him. However, apart from the people around him and the burly middle-aged man, no one believed what he said. They all thought that he was exaggerating. In the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were very few cultivators at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. At the very least, there were only about 10 people at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage on the Supreme Saint ranking. Although the city they were in was bustling, it was not considered a big city in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. It was rare to even see a powerhouse at the 3rd form of the Saint Celestial stage, let alone a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. However, there were some people who knew the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. For example, the finely dressed old man and the skinny middle-aged man standing behind the finely dressed old man. At this moment, he saw Duan Tian appearing out of thin air in front of his companion and grabbing his companion's neck with one hand before lifting him up. Most importantly, his companion did not seem to have any strength to fight back at all. The skinny middle-aged man was stunned. "Who are you?" the finely dressed old man asked coldly as he looked at Duan Tian with a piercing gaze. Bang! Duan Tian casually tossed the burly middle-aged man to the ground before he returned to Duan Ling's side. He looked at the finely dressed old man calmly before he said indifferently, Duan Tian, the successor of the Fog Rain sect, 7 Absolute sect. 7 Absolute sect. The successor of the Fog Rain sect. The finely dressed old man's eyes widened when he heard Duan Tian's words. Even the skinny middle-aged man standing behind the finely dressed old man, the burly middle-aged man who was tossed aside by Duan Tian, and the others present on the scene looked at Duan Tian in shock and disbelief. This purple-clad young man was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect. In recent years, the 7 Absolute sect had been the hottest topic in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Very few people would talk about the 7 Absolute sect without mentioning it. Up until now, apart from the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, all the successors of the 7 Absolute sect's 7 Absolutes had appeared. For this reason, everyone in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land was curious about the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect. They were curious about what kind of person he was, what kind of cultivation base he had, and how strong he was. Most of the people present on the scene were curious as well. However, they did not expect that the successor of the Fog Rain progeny would appear. One day, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect, would appear before their eyes. The people present on the scene were still in shock over Duan Tian's identity as the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect. I was wondering when an eminent celestial like you appeared in the upper province of the Martial Saint Land. As it turns out, you're the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect. Chapter 2343. Based on the finely clad old man's words, it was obvious he had seen through Duan Ling Tian's current cultivation base through Duan Ling Tian's attack. An eminent celestial. However, based on his tone, one could tell he was not afraid of Duan Ling Tian. Although he knew Duan Ling Tian was an eminent celestial, he did not seem to be afraid of Duan Ling Tian at all. Moreover, he did not reveal any other emotions. Based on his calm expression, it was as though he did not think Duan Ling Tian was a threat at all. Although the finely dressed old man was able to remain calm when he saw Duan Ling Tian was an eminent celestial, it did not mean others could remain calm as well. The successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect, is actually an eminent celestial? The moment the brocade-robed old man finished speaking, the eyes of the bamboo-like middle-aged man standing behind him could not help but violently shrink. His thin face was filled with shock. The burly middle-aged man who was sent flying by Duan Ling Tian and had just managed to get up from the ground trembled violently when he heard the finely dressed old man's words. At this moment he felt chills running down his spine. No wonder my Saint Origin couldn't break through the shackles of his energy even after I exerted all my strength earlier. As it turns out, he's an eminent celestial. In that case, everything that happened just now can be explained. The burly middle-aged man was shocked when he found out the purple-clad young man he had provoked was an eminent celestial. Fear still lingered in his heart. Fortunately, he didn't kill me. Otherwise, I would have died. The burly middle-aged man was relieved when he thought about this. He was only a martial cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. An eminent celestial could kill him as easily as killing a chicken. When the burly middle-aged man recalled what he had said to the purple-clad young man, he could not help but blush. How could he kill the purple-clad young man as easily as killing a chicken? The other party could kill him as easily as killing a chicken. The two middle-aged servants by the old man's side were already so shocked when they heard the old man's words, let alone the crowd of onlookers present. Half-step celestial? Did I hear wrongly? He said. Half-step immortal? After the crowd of onlookers came back to their senses one after another, one of them took the lead and asked in surprise. He even suspected that he had misheard. You didn't hear wrongly. He did say eminent celestial. Soon, many people followed to confirm. He said the successor of the first absolute of the Seven Absolute Sect, the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect, is an eminent celestial? That's right. It's no wonder the Seven Absolute Sect's Misty Rain successor was so fast. I didn't even catch a glimpse of him when he arrived in front of the burly middle-aged man. It was too fast. If he's a half-step immortal, it's only natural for him to possess such speed. If he's an eminent celestial, he shouldn't be lying, right? He said the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. Put aside the fact that he's an eminent celestial, his identity as the successor of the Seven Absolute Sect's Misty Rain successor and the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect wouldn't lie. Moreover, with his identity he wouldn't lie. Does this mean the burly middle-aged man is really a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage? As the crowd discussed among themselves, they realized they had been overthinking things. The burly middle-aged man was most likely a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. It was only natural that a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage would not be able to withstand a single blow from an eminent celestial. An eminent celestial. I've only heard of such a powerhouse before. This is my first time seeing one. Me too. I didn't expect the current successor of the Seven Absolute Sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, to be an eminent celestial. Moreover, he looks so young. It's understandable. The strongest female disciples in the Seven Absolute Sect are suspected to have broken through to the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. As the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect, it would be strange if he's not an eminent celestial. Indeed. When the group of people discussed animatedly again, their gazes landed on Duan Ling Tian in unison. They stared fixedly at Duan Ling Tian as though they wanted to imprint this person deeply in their minds and engrave him in their hearts. An old woman suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't he Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism? Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism?" As the old woman took the lead to speak, more and more people began to carefully size up Duan Ling Tian's face. Gradually, they began to feel that Duan Ling Tian looked familiar. Memories from a few years ago began to surface in their minds. He's indeed Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. I've seen his portrait before. I've seen his portrait as well. However, that was a few years ago. I didn't recall it earlier. No wonder I thought he looked familiar. As it turns out, he's Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Apart from that, when he revealed his identity earlier, apart from saying he's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, he also said his name is Duan Lingtian. He did say his name is Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism from a few years ago, has become the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect? Isn't this a little too big? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. As more and more people recognized Duan Lingtian's handsome face, they began to realize something. Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism from a few years ago, and the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, were the same person. Aren't the seven absolute sect and Zoroastrianism sworn enemies? That's right. Not only is the seven absolute sect sworn enemies with Zoroastrianism, but it's also sworn enemies with Zhuangzi Buddhism and the Heaven Divination sect. Why would the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, be the guardian of Zoroastrianism? Many people were puzzled by this. All of you are really stupid. Can't Duan Lingtian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, join Zoroastrianism as a spy to gather information about Zoroastrianism? If that's the case, it makes sense. Many people who were puzzled by Duan Lingtian's identity as the sect leader of Zoroastrianism and a member of the Seven Absolutes sect were instantly enlightened. However, isn't Duan Lingtian's improvement in strength a little too exaggerated? At this moment someone said, I think. A few years ago he defeated Hao Shuang, the strongest person below the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage in the Tao Martial Saint Land. In just a few years he had already become an eminent celestial? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? It's indeed a little exaggerated. Could it be that he's mistaken? For a moment, the gazes of everyone present fell on the old man in embroidered clothes in unison. Earlier, the finely dressed old man was the one who had said Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial. If the successor of the seven absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, possessed a cultivation base at the level of an eminent celestial, they would not be surprised, perplexed, or suspicious even though they were shocked. However, Duan Lingtian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, was no stranger to them at all. This was because he had become famous in the upper province of the Tao Martial Saint Land a few years ago. He was Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, whose strength was second only to Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. In just a few years, Duan Lingtian, who had not even broken through to the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage, had become an eminent celestial. Was this possible? Was this realistic? Although the strongest person present on the scene was only at the second form of the Saint Celestial stage and had not experienced the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage, it was still possible. However, as the saying went, even if you haven't eaten pork, you've heard of how pigs run. For this reason, they knew how difficult it was to break through to the ninth form. As it turns out, you're Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism who shook the upper province of the Tao Martial Saint Land a few years ago. You're widely acknowledged as the strongest prodigy in the Tao Martial Saint Land after Pei Si Hai. The brocade-robed old man ignored the skeptical gazes of the crowd. His gaze on Duan Lingtian turned colder and colder. It seems like you've been concealing your cultivation base a few years ago. That's why they thought you haven't even broken through to the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage. The brocade-robed old man continued to say, however, you can't hide your cultivation base from me. You're indeed an eminent celestial. The brocade-robed old man was infuriated when he saw Duan Lingtian looking at him indifferently. Do you think you can stop me from taking your daughter as my disciple just because you're an eminent celestial? Do you really think eminent celestials like you are the strongest in the mundane realms? The brocade-robed old man's words were filled with confidence. His words shocked everyone present into a daze. Eminent celestials. Aren't they the strongest in the mundane realms? Why does it sound like eminent celestials aren't the strongest in the mundane realms? Many people were shocked. However, most of them thought the old man was spouting nonsense. At this moment, Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow and said indifferently, "You're right." Chapter 2344. Previously, when Duan Lingtian had just walked out of the restaurant, his gaze had been attracted by the finely dressed old man who was walking towards him. This was because the finely dressed old man gave him a sense of familiarity. Previously he had only felt this way from Liao Nai Jiang, a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Naturally, Duan Lingtian was not certain the finely dressed old man was a bodiless celestial like Liao Nai Jiang. There were many reasons why he was certain the finely dressed old man was a bodiless celestial. First, it was because of the feeling he had earlier. Second, it was because of the two middle-aged servants by the finely dressed old man's side. The burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage while the skinny middle-aged man was at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. The finely dressed old man either had an extraordinary background or was at least an eminent celestial to be able to make such a person his servant. Third, the finely dressed old man had seen through Duan Lingtian's cultivation base as soon as he attacked the burly middle-aged man. Only an eminent celestial would be able to see through Duan Lingtian's cultivation base. Fourthly, the brocade-robed old man did not seem flustered at all after he revealed Duan Lingtian's cultivation base was that of an eminent celestial. This proved the finely dressed old man was not afraid of Duan Lingtian even if he was an eminent celestial. In fact, this proved the finely dressed old man was at least a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Otherwise, how could he be so confident? Fifth, only a three-tribulation bodiless celestial or above would be able to detect his daughter's innate talent through his divine consciousness. Based on all these factors, Duan Lingtian was certain the finely dressed old man was not an ordinary person. He was certain the finely dressed old man was a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Do you really think I can't tell you're a bodiless celestial? For this reason, Duan Lingtian did not doubt the finely dressed old man's words. You know about bodiless celestials? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the finely dressed old man was slightly taken aback. He was surprised that Duan Lingtian knew about bodiless celestials. However, before Duan Lingtian could reply, the finely dressed old man nodded and said, I almost forgot. Not only are you a guardian of Zoroastrianism, but you're also the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. You're the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. It's only natural you're aware of bodiless celestials. The finely dressed old man's words was not surprising. If I'm not mistaken, you're a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, right? The finely dressed old of the celestial stage had the finely dressed old oldest upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words. The finely dressed old man was not surprised at all. After all, only a three-tribulation bodiless celestial or above could look down on an eminent celestial. For this reason he was not surprised that Duan Lingtian was able to guess that he was a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Humph! My lord is a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. Right at this moment, the bamboo middle-aged man standing behind the old man in embroidered clothes spoke with a proud expression to Duan Lingtian. Four-tribulation bodiless celestial? Duan Lingtian's expression turned slightly solemn when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He could not help but shudder in his heart. If a four-tribulation bodiless celestial unleashes his full strength, he'll be able to tear a hole in the void. He's much stronger than a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. The finely dressed old man was the second bodiless celestial Duan Lingtian had encountered. If he was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, he would be much stronger than the three-tribulation bodiless celestial, Liao Nai Jiang. A smug smile appeared on the skinny man's face when he saw the solemn expression on Duan Lingtian's face after he spoke. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was confident. He was certain this eminent celestial, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, would push his daughter out to be his lord's disciple. However, when he heard Duan Lingtian's words, the smile on his face froze. He even wondered if he was dreaming. Let's forget about what happened today. If you dare to be so aggressive, I'll kill you. Duan Lingtian said calmly as he looked at the finely dressed old man indifferently. From the beginning until the end, he was not afraid at all when he learned the finely dressed old man was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. At this moment he was in a hurry to return to the Zoroastrianism. He did not want to cause any trouble. Although this was a small matter to him, he was confident he could kill a mere four-tribulation bodiless celestial. However, if it was possible, he did not want to kill the finely dressed old man. After all, the finely dressed old man was a human, a bodiless celestial. When the devil clans invaded the upper province in the future, human bodiless celestials would be the backbone of the human race. It would be a great loss to the human race if he killed the finely dressed old man. For this reason, Duan Lingtian had made up his mind. If the finely dressed old man was not aggressive, he would not make a move. He planned to let the finely dressed old man live. How dare you? How dare you? As soon as Duan Ling Tian's words left his mouth, the bamboo-skinned middle-aged man and the burly middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. Then they shouted at Duan Ling Tian in unison, "Stop! If you dare to be aggressive again, I'll kill you." They did not expect Duan Ling Tian would dare to provoke them. They did not expect Duan Ling Tian to be so arrogant after finding out their master was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. How dare a mere eminent celestial overturn the heavens? When the bamboo-clad middle-aged man and the burly middle-aged man shouted at Duan Ling Tian in unison, the finely dressed old man was so enraged that his body began to tremble violently. His expression had turned completely grave. Duan Ling Tian. It seems like although you're the successor of the seven absolute sect's first absolute, the fog rain progeny, and you know about bodiless celestials, you don't know about the levels of bodiless celestials. The finely dressed old man who was enraged and filled with killing intent said coldly, "Fine. Before you die today, I'll let you understand the levels of bodiless celestials. Two tribulation bodiless celestials are as strong as eminent celestials like you. Three tribulation bodiless celestials are stronger than eminent celestials. Four tribulation bodiless celestials like me are stronger than three tribulation bodiless celestials. If I make a move, I'll be able to tear a hole in the void. If I find the right place, I'll be able to tear a hole in the void and travel between the upper and lower province of the Tao Martial Saint Land." The finely dressed old man revealed the strength of a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. "Before I die?" Duan Ling Tian narrowed his eyes when he heard the finely dressed old man's words. Based on the finely dressed old man's words, Duan Ling Tian knew the finely dressed old man wanted to kill him. The finely dressed old man was determined to kill him. Two tribulation bodiless celestial? Three tribulation bodiless celestial? Four tribulation bodiless celestial? What's a bodiless celestial? Why are there so many levels? As soon as the finely dressed old man finished speaking, his robe fluttered as he prepared to make a move on Duan Ling Tian. The onlookers began to discuss among themselves when they heard the finely dressed old man's words. Did he say that a three tribulation bodiless celestial is stronger than an eminent celestial? I heard that as well. Moreover, he said he's a four tribulation bodiless celestial, so he's even stronger than a three tribulation bodiless celestial. Moreover, he can tear a hole in the void and tear a hole in the void to travel between the upper and lower province. Based on what he said, is he even human? That's the ability of a celestial, right? At the same time, the group of onlookers was inexplicably shocked as they recalled the words of the brocade-robed old man. They did not know about bodiless celestials. In fact, they had never even heard of bodiless celestials before this. Elementary devouring tactic. Duan Ling Tian instantly cast the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, when he sensed the finely dressed old man was about to make a move. Swoosh! A whirlpool appeared and overlapped with Duan Ling Tian as it emitted a devouring force. In just a blink of an eye, the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings was completely devoured by him. As expected of the upper province, the heaven and earth spirit energy here is much richer than the lower province. In just a blink of an eye, the elementary devouring tactic that I cast has reached its limit. After about a breath, Duan Ling Tian could clearly feel the celestial origin energy in his body had risen to its peak state. If he unleashed his full strength, he could even tear a hole in the void that would take 30 minutes to heal. The finely dressed old man, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, was the first to notice the change in the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings. He looked at Duan Ling Tian and sneered. Your assist-type divine ability is pretty good. You managed to absorb the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings. However, do you think an assist-type divine ability like you, an eminent celestial, is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial like me? Today I, Chen Yi-Ru, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, shall kill the successor of the seven absolute sect's first absolute, the fog rain progeny. The finely dressed old man, Chen Yi-Ru, glared at Duan Ling Tian and said coldly, after I kill you, my name will go down in history. After all, the successor of the seven absolute sect's fog rain progeny is hard to come by. Before the crowd could recover from the shock of seeing the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings being devoured, they heard Chen Yi-Ru's words. At this moment they realized what was going on. Chen Yi-Ru, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, was going to make his move. Chapter 2345. The successor of the seven absolute sect's first absolute, the fog rain lineage, was rarely seen in tens of thousands of years. This was not a secret to the people in the Tao Martial Saint Land. This was because the Seven Absolute sect would only enter the world when the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, was born. After all, every generation's sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect was the successor of the Misty Rain sect. As long as the successor of the Misty Rain sect did not appear, it meant that the Seven Absolute sect was without a leader. So what if a masterless sect entered the world? In the end, they were like a sheet of loose sand. Due to this reason, when the Seven Absolute sect entered the Upper Province a few years ago, the people in the Upper Province of the Dao Martial Saint Land were aware of the situation. The successor of the first Absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, the Fog Rain progeny, must have been born. Ever since then, everyone in the Upper Province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, including most of the people present on the scene, was curious. Who was the successor of the Seven Absolute sect's first Absolute, the Fog Rain progeny? However, the successor of the Seven Absolute sect's first Absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, had appeared before everyone. At the same time, they learned that, as it turned out, they had heard of the current successor of the Seven Absolute sect's first Absolute, the Fog Rain progeny. However, he had another identity at that time. Protector of Zoroastrianism, Duan Lingtian. He said he's a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial. He's even stronger than a 3-tribulation bodiless celestial who's stronger than an eminent celestial. I wonder if he's just bragging. When the crowd saw Chen Yi-Ru, a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial, they could not help but mutter to themselves. Now the atmosphere was extremely tense and it was completely silent. Therefore this person's murmur clearly entered the ears of everyone present, and it was especially piercing to the ears. Humph! Almost at the same time, Chen Yi-Ru, who was about to attack Duan Lingtian, paused slightly and then let out a cold snort. Puchi. Accompanying the cold snort was the faint sound of something being penetrated. The next moment, bang! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the person who had been muttering earlier fell to the ground and crashed heavily, kicking up a cloud of dust. When he fell, his eyes were still wide open. He died with a grievance. In between his eyebrows, there was a hideous and terrifying bloody hole. Blood was still gushing out from it like a fountain. Just looking at it made people feel cold all over and their hair stand on end. Immediately, everyone present gasped. When they looked at Chen Yi-Ru again, their eyes were full of fear and dread. Just because he casually said something about him, he was killed by him. From the beginning to the end, they didn't even see how Chen Yi-Ru killed the person lying on the ground. As expected of a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial. With just a casual glance, a beam of light shot out of his eyes is comparable to the full-powered attack of an eminent celestial. Among those present on the scene, only Duan Lingtian had seen how Chen Yi-Ru killed the person. A beam of light shot out of his eyes and pierced the person's glabella, killing him instantly. With this as an example, no one dared to say anything even if they doubted Chen Yi-Ru's strength. They only dared to think about it in their hearts or communicate through voice transmissions with their friends. At this moment, the atmosphere turned even quieter. Although Chen Yi-Ru had killed the person, the people present on the scene still had no idea how strong he was. After all, even if a powerhouse at the 7th form of the Saint Celestial stage or above made a move, they would not be able to catch a trace of it. Therefore, most people still doubted whether Chen Yi-Ru's strength was as strong as he had said. We'll find out soon enough if he's as strong as he says. The battle between him and Duan Lingtian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, is imminent. Let's fight. Let's fight. Let's see how strong Duan Lingtian is since he's already an eminent celestial. Although the people present on the scene did not dare to speak recklessly, they could not help but mutter inwardly. Everyone's eyes were trained on Duan Lingtian and Chen Yi-Ru. One of them was the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. He was also the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. The other person was a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial who claimed his strength was much stronger than an eminent celestial. Was the latter boasting shamelessly? Once the two of them fought, the outcome of the battle would be revealed. From today onward, Duan Lingtian no longer exists in the mundane realm. Chen Yi-Ru said coldly as he shifted his gaze to Duan Lingtian. His robes fluttered in the air. The rolling power was like a storm that wreaked havoc around his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Shameless boasting. Duan Lingtian smiled contemptuously when he heard Chen Yi-Ru's words. His celestial origin energy that had been boosted by the elementary devouring tactic surged out of his body through his 99 saint veins. His celestial origin energy was mixed with his saint origin. If it was not for the fact that Duanling Tian had not held back, the celestial origin energy and saint origin energy that surged out of his body would have been enough to tear the void apart. You'll find out soon enough if I'm boasting shamelessly or not. Chen Yiru sneered. The moment he raised his hands, the power that swept out from his body surged again. It was like a layer of waves in the sea that soared into the sky. Chen Yiru stood there with his back against a wave of energy. He was like a deity, carrying with him a seemingly endless divine might. Today Chen Yiru will kill Duanling Tian, the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect. At the same time, Chen Yiru's arms shook violently. At this moment, the energy behind him that was like a raging wave began to shrink rapidly. In the end, it transformed into a thick and heavy saber that was extremely solid. The gigantic saber was formed by the energy surging out of Chen Yiru's body. It emitted an oppressive aura. It was as though a primordial ferocious beast was sleeping in the gigantic saber and would wake up at any moment. At Chen Yiru's current cultivation base, weapons in the mundane realm, including the super saint weapons on the 10 great saint weapons ranking, would not be of much help to him. Not only would they not be of much help to him, but they would also be a burden to him. A mere 4 tribulation bodiless celestial dares to act so arrogantly in front of me, Duanling Tian? Today I'll show you that even if I'm only an eminent celestial, I won't need more than 10 moves to defeat you. Upon hearing Chen Yiru's words, Duanling Tian's eyes turned cold as he sneered. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, the energy that surged out of his body had already transformed into hundreds and thousands of white sword rays that hovered around his body. At this moment, it seemed as though Duanling Tian was surrounded by a rain of swords. However, this rain of swords was under his control. They revolved around him continuously, like agile dragons swimming in the air. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew, causing Duanling Tian's purple robes to flutter. Duanling Tian stood with his hands clasped behind his back as he looked at Chen Yiru contemptuously. A hint of disdain could be seen on the corners of his mouth. It was as though he did not take Chen Yiru seriously at all. In fact, Duanling Tian did not take Chen Yiru seriously at all. Previously, when Duanling Tian was still in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, he had learned about bodiless celestials and the strength of bodiless celestials. At the same time, he knew Chen Yiru was not weak at all. With his current strength, he was comparable to a 5 tribulation bodiless celestial or even a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial. With such confidence, how could he take a mere 4 tribulation bodiless celestial seriously? However, Chen Yiru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, was oblivious to Duanling Tian's thoughts. Otherwise, he would not have dared to act arrogantly in front of Duanling Tian even if he was given 100 guts. You won't need more than 10 moves to defeat me? Chen Yiru was taken aback when he heard Duanling Tian's words. When he regained his senses, a furious expression appeared on his face as he said, Duanling Tian, I'd like to see how you're going to defeat me in 10 moves. Chen Yiru will only need 3 moves to kill you. As soon as Chen Yiru finished speaking, he made his move again. He stood motionless on the spot, but the thick and heavy saber in his hands that was formed entirely from the energy that surged out of his body was held upright by him. He pointed it straight at the sky as if he was going to fight with the heavens. Bus, 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 bus. A series of saber cries rang out as Chen Yiru's heavy saber began to glow with saber light. 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. The saber ray continued to grow until it was more than 100 meters long. However, the attention of the people present on the scene was not on the saber ray. Is that a tear in the void? Seems like it. He can really tear the void? Heavens! Even an eminent celestial can only tear the space around the pseudo-realm that he created and leave a tear in the void that serves as an entrance to the pseudo-realm. It's not difficult for those at the 7th form of the Saint Celestial stage or above to open a tear in the void near a pseudo-realm created by an eminent celestial as long as they can sense the existence of the pseudo-realm. However, the tear in the void doesn't seem like an entrance to a pseudo-realm created by an eminent celestial. Chapter 2346. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the huge saber in Chen Yiru's hand that was pointing at the sky shot out a saber ray that was more than 100 meters long. The saber ray rubbed against the air and emitted a crisp sound. The frequency of the sound was no different from the sound of firecrackers. Rip, rip. As the sound of firecrackers rang in the air, the sound of something being torn apart rang in the air as well. The sound came from the saber ray in Chen Yiru's hand. Black cracks that resembled tiny black snakes appeared in the air around the saber ray in his hand. They were ferocious and terrifying void rifts. These cracks appeared and disappeared as quickly as they appeared. However, every time they appeared, they would appear in groups, giving people a kind of visual shock and even more so, making people feel a chill down their spines. After all, only when one's strength had reached a certain level would one be able to tear apart space and leave cracks in the air. Even an eminent celestial would not be able to do this. Perhaps, an eminent celestial would be able to create a tear in the void near the pseudo-realm. However, the tear in the void could only be the entrance to the pseudo-realm. At most, one could only tear a crack in the air near a pseudo-realm since there was only one entrance to a pseudo-realm. Even if he's an eminent celestial and there's a pseudo-realm nearby, it's impossible for him to leave so many cracks in the void. The people present on the scene felt their scalps go numb when they saw the cracks in the air around the saber ray in Chen Yiru's hand, because this was completely beyond the scope of their understanding. After all, even an eminent celestial would not be able to tear space apart so easily and leave so many cracks in the void. Could it be that he's not lying? Is he really a four-tribulation bodiless celestial who's stronger than an eminent celestial? Although I don't know what a four-tribulation bodiless celestial is, based on what I know, an eminent celestial can ascend to a higher realm and become a celestial. I'm afraid only a celestial is stronger than an eminent celestial, right? Immortal. You mean this old man is an immortal? Apart from immortals, who else can tear apart space so easily and casually and leave cracks in the void? As Chen Yiru gathered his strength, the saber light in his hand tore through space, leaving behind cracks in the void. Everyone present was shocked again. At the same time, the doubt in their eyes when they looked at Chen Yiru disappeared and was replaced with admiration. In their eyes, the brocade-robed old man in front of him was already an immortal. Although they did not know why there was such a powerful existence in the mundane realm, however, this did not affect their respect for this old man who could easily tear space apart. Duan Lingtian, take this. As Chen Yiru let out a beast-like roar, his body began to expand in front of everyone's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a giant that was over 100 meters tall. The thick and heavy saber in his hand also merged with the saber aura that was more than 100 meters long, turning into a giant saber that was more than 100 meters long. A giant and a saber. At this moment, Chen Yiru stood with his saber in hand. He looked like a god of sabers that had descended to the mortal realm. Peerless. Chen Yiru, who had transformed into a giant that was over 100 meters tall, suddenly cried out. His voice was like a thunder god's roar that reverberated in the ears of everyone present on the scene. At this moment, no. Some of the people with a weaker cultivation base felt their eardrums rupture. Some of them even bled from their 7 orifices and were on the verge of death. Chen Yiru's cry was extremely terrifying. This was only the beginning. Boom, 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 boom. Almost at the same time as Chen Yiru's shout, the 2 spiderweb-like cracks that had appeared on the ground beneath his feet spread even further, turning into a bottomless gully. When the onlookers rose into the air and dodged the ravines that formed from the cracks on the ground, the gigantic saber that Chen Yiru was holding with both hands, which was pointing at the sky, finally came crashing down. Bus, 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 bus. Wherever the huge saber passed, the sound of the saber was deafening. Cracks appeared in the void that quickly closed after a while. It was as though there were small black snakes flashing in and out of the void. During this process, the power that Chen Yiru had been restraining in his saber was completely unleashed as the saber whistled through the air. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As soon as Chen Yiru's huge saber whistled out, a terrifying energy surged out in all directions like a raging sea. Instantly, bang, 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 bang. Those who had just risen into the air and were close to Chen Yiru were affected by the energy that swept out from Chen Yiru's huge saber. Their bodies exploded and turned into a bloody mist. They did not even have time to react. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding void and the surrounding ground were all shrouded in a bloody mist, turning the place crimson red. Boom. Rumble. When the bloody mist appeared, the restaurant in front of them was shrouded in the power of Chen Yiru's huge saber. In an instant, it collapsed and turned into ruins. Those who crawled out were all covered in blood. It was unknown if they were still alive. It was not only the restaurant that was affected. Even the surrounding buildings collapsed and turned into ruins when they were affected by Chen Yiru's power. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. It happened only when Chen Yiru drew his saber that the onlookers did not even have time to react. Buzz. At the same time, the earth-shattering sound of the saber rang out. It was the huge saber in Chen Yiru's hand. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was powerful enough to split Mount Hua. It whistled and whistled as if it could destroy everything in its path. At this moment, Qin Yi Ru seemed to have transformed into a peerless god of war. He had unleashed a peerless attack. And this saber strike of his was named Peerless. Peerless Saber. How dare you call it peerless, with such little power? Is it worthy? However, Duanling Tian merely smiled disdainfully as he faced Qin Yi Ru's peerless saber ray. He easily protected the three women by his side as he faced the saber ray that seemed capable of destroying everything in its path. It was as if he did not care about Qin Yi Ru's saber at all. Go! Seeing Qin Yi Ru's peerless saber, which had the power to tear the void apart, Duanling Tian calmly uttered a word. Almost at the same time Duanling Tian uttered this word. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The hundreds and thousands of white sword rays that were hovering around Duanling Tian shot out again in just a blink of an eye. The sword gleams continued to expand and condense in front of him, forming a huge sword net that was like a layer of protective shield. During this process, the sword rays that formed the net of swords left cracks in the void that looked like tiny black snakes as they shot through the void. These void rifts opened one after another, and then closed again not long after. However, because the hundreds and thousands of white sword lights were too dazzling, even Qin Yi Ru himself didn't notice the spatial cracks that appeared and disappeared frequently. Otherwise he would have noticed it. When the hundreds and thousands of sword rays shot out from Duanling Tian's sword, they were as powerful as Qin Yi Ru's peerless saber. Bus, 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 bus. The sound of saber whistling reverberated in the air. Qin Yi Ru, who had transformed into a giant over 100 meters tall, wielded the huge saber that was more than 100 meters long and landed on the net of swords that had formed in front of Duanling Tian. Break! Qin Yi Ru roared again when the huge saber was about to land on the net of swords. His voice was like a clap of thunder that temporarily suppressed the sound of saber whistling. In the end, Qin Yi Ru's huge saber that was more than 100 meters long finally landed on the net of swords. Boom! When the saber landed on the net of swords, it was as though the saber had landed on the surface of the sea. It caused the surface of the sea to tremble and sink. After a few moments, boom, 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 boom. When the huge blade that was over 100 meters long pressed down on the sword net until it trembled to the extreme, the two of them exploded at the same time. Two vast and majestic forces collided, causing the void to tremble. The air was constantly compressed and rubbed against each other, and numerous ferocious cracks appeared in the void. At the same time, the enormous mushroom cloud formed by the collision of the two forces also emitted waves of extremely terrifying shock waves that swept in all directions. It carried a strength that seemed to be able to engulf the entire world as it continued to spread. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosions rang in the air. These loud noises came from an area of 1,000 meters with the mushroom cloud as the center. The shockwaves from the mushroom cloud flattened the land within 1,000 meters of the mushroom cloud. Apart from a few powerhouses at the Saint Celestial stage who managed to escape, the rest of the onlookers were killed. Even Qin Yi Ru's two servants, one at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage and the other at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, had retreated 1,000 meters away from the mushroom cloud. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of the wind could be heard clearly. Based on this, one could see how quiet the scene was. At this moment, Duanling Tian and Qin Yi Ru were hovering in the air. Chapter 2347. Everything within a 1,000-meter radius was flattened. Even the ground had a crater that was a few hundred meters deep. During this process, not only were the buildings within a radius of 1,000 meters flattened and huge craters were blasted into the ground, even the people present were killed by the aftershock of the explosion. How terrifying! Is that even a human strength? Although I've never seen an eminent celestial before, I've read about them in some ancient books. There were descriptions of battles between eminent celestials, but it wasn't as terrifying as this. Don't tell me you think they're eminent celestials? Didn't you see that the old man who called himself a four-tribulation bodiless celestial was able to tear the void apart? Even Duanling Tian is able to tear the void apart, right? I saw it as well. Earlier, when the sword rays shot out from Duanling Tian's body and formed the sword net, there were indeed many cracks in the void. It's obvious that their first exchange ended in a draw. It seems like Duanling Tian isn't just an eminent celestial. The few people who had managed to escape from the 1,000-meter radius of Duanling Tian and Qin Yi Ru were shocked when they looked at Duanling Tian and Qin Yi Ru again. When their eyes landed on Duanling Tian, it was as though they had seen a ghost. Initially they were skeptical about whether Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial or not. However, they no longer doubted Duan Lingtian's strength. Based on Duan Lingtian's strength, it was impossible for him to be just an eminent celestial. This was because Duan Lingtian's strength had far surpassed that of an eminent celestial. In fact, he was comparable to a celestial from a higher realm. So this is the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? The current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect? When they thought of this, their hearts trembled again. How is this possible? He actually managed to block Milord's peerless blade, and was even able to fight Milord on equal footing? How is this possible? Presently, it wasn't just the few surviving existences at the Saint Celestial stage and above who were shocked by the scene before their eyes. Even Chen Yiru's two servants were horrified. When they looked at Duan Lingtian again, it was as if they had seen a ghost. Wasn't Duan Lingtian an eminent celestial? How could a mere eminent celestial withstand the all-out attack of their lord, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial? After all, although the peerless saber was not their lord's strongest technique, it was enough to kill a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, let alone an eminent celestial. Is it possible that he's a four-tribulation bodiless celestial as well? When Chen Yiru's two servants recalled how Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru were evenly matched earlier, they could not help but think to themselves, Duan Lingtian was not an eminent celestial, he was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. What happened? There was such a huge commotion earlier. Heavens! Look over there. The land within a radius of 1,000 meters has actually turned into ruins. Moreover, there's a huge crater in the ground. The crater must be at least a few hundred meters deep, right? Even if two eminent celestials in the mundane realms fought, they wouldn't be able to create such a huge commotion, right? After all, the ground and the materials used to construct the buildings in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land are extremely high-grade. The materials from the Debussy subterranean can't compare to them. That's right. Even then, not only was the land within 1,000 meters flattened, but there's even a crater that's a few hundred meters deep. The commotion in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land attracted many people since it was considered a bustling city. These people came from all over the city, and their numbers were increasing. There are a few people over there. Soon after, someone saw a few people hovering in the air outside the crater. These people were none other than the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive and Chen Yiru's two servants. There are a few people over there as well. At the same time, someone noticed a few figures hovering above the crater that was hundreds of meters deep. These figures were none other than Duan Lingtian Ke, Duan Si Ling Ganru Yen and Chen Yiru. At this moment, Duan Lingtian was hovering in the air, protecting Ke and the other two women. His expression was calm and indifferent. Chen Yiru's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Duan Lingtian. It took him a long time before he regained his senses. Who can tell me what's going on here? Let's go. Let's go and ask. A group of people who had heard the commotion quickly arrived near the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive. They began to ask them what had happened. If it was any other time, these people who were at the Saint Celestial stage and above would naturally be arrogant and would not bother to answer these people's questions. However, after witnessing Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru's strength, they realized how insignificant they were. They were like ants in front of Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru Yen. They could not even withstand a single blow. If they had not been lucky earlier, they would have been killed by Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru Yen. After all, the shockwaves from Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru's battle could easily wipe them out. That purple-clad young man is Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism. Currently he has another identity. He's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. He's the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. His strength surpasses eminent celestials. Earlier, the few Saint Celestials who were at the Saint Celestial stage and above no longer acted arrogantly as they patiently recounted everything that had happened. The people who had come to watch the show were shocked. Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism, is actually the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? The sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect? Duan Lingtian's strength surpasses eminent celestials in just a few years? Moreover, he can even tear space apart and leave cracks in the void when he attacks? Indeed, tearing space apart isn't something an eminent celestial can do. Aren't eminent celestials the peak of the mundane realms? Once an eminent celestial becomes an eminent celestial, he'll be guided by the celestial ascension force to ascend to a higher realm and become a true celestial. However, it's extremely difficult for a celestial to return to the mundane realms. However, the strength they displayed is clearly above the strength of an eminent celestial. How do you explain this? I'm certain their strength is comparable to a celestial. I just don't know how they managed to raise their strength to such a level. That finely dressed old man, Chen Ru, seems to call himself a four-tribulation bodiless celestial? The people who had just arrived began to discuss among themselves when they regained their senses. All of them were shocked by Duan Lingtian and Chen Ru's strength. Chen Ru? Did all of you say the old man's name is Chen Ru? Also, you said that Chen Ru used a saber and shouted "Peerless" when he used his technique? A middle-aged man who was dressed like a scholar suddenly asked with a horrified expression on his face as he looked at the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive. Yes. Although they did not know why the middle-aged scholar asked this question, they still nodded. From the beginning until the end, they did not see how Chen Ru had made his move. However, they were 100% certain that Chen Ru was using a saber and had shouted the words "matchless." Heavens! He can't be that person, right? The middle-aged scholar seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly opened his eyes wide. His face was full of shock and disbelief. He was dumbstruck. What are you talking about? Don't tell me you recognize him? Who's he? If you recognize him, hurry up and tell us who he is. Is it fun to keep people in suspense? Soon after, the people around the middle-aged scholar could not help but urge him to speak. At this moment, the middle-aged scholar finally regained his senses. He gulped before he continued to say, "I've been keeping an eye on the Supreme Saint ranking for a long time. In fact, I've often read the previous Supreme Saint ranking. Get to the point." Before the middle-aged scholar could finish speaking, many people frowned and interrupted him. "I'm about to get to the point." The middle-aged scholar frowned when he was interrupted. He continued to say, "I remember the person who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago was none other than Chen Ru. Moreover, Chen Ru was also known as Qin Sandao at that time. Qin Sandao was a famous saber cultivator prodigy in that era. He fused martial tactics and divine abilities to create three extremely powerful saber techniques. They were the Peerless Saber, the World-Cleansing Saber, and the World-Annihilating Saber. The middle-aged scholar paused for a moment when he reached this part of his sentence. He studied the finely dressed old man in the distance as though he was trying to confirm if the old man was the person from 5,000 years ago. "You mean Chen Ru is Qin Sandao who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago?" Chapter 2348. It must be a coincidence. The middle-aged scholar shook his head in response to the question. Coincidence? How can there be such a coincidence? The finely dressed old man is also called Chen Ru, and he uses a saber as well. Moreover, he shouted "Peerless" when he attacked earlier. It's very likely that he used the Peerless Saber technique. That's right. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? In my opinion, Chen Ru is the powerhouse who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. The middle-aged scholar shook his head and said it was a coincidence. However, the people around him rejected his words. It was fine if the name was a coincidence. It was fine if the weapon was a coincidence. How could the name of the saber technique be a coincidence? How could there be so many coincidences? Moreover, all of them happened to the same person. To be honest, I don't think there's such a coincidence. The middle-aged scholar could not help but smile wryly. However, according to the records of the Supreme Saint ranking, Chen Ru, who was ranked second 5,000 years ago, failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation 4,000 years ago when the Celestial Ascension Tribulation descended. He failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation? Along with the middle-aged scholar's words, the surrounding group of people were instantly dumbfounded. They were all dumbstruck. In their opinion, this was not the case. Failure to pass the Celestial Ascension Tribulation meant death. If Chen Ru had failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation 4,000 years ago, it was impossible for him to be the finely dressed old man today. Are you sure Chen Ru from 5,000 years ago failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation? Many people looked at the middle-aged scholar skeptically. Take a look for yourselves. The middle-aged scholar raised his hand and took out an ancient book. It was an issue of the Supreme Saint ranking from more than 4,000 years ago. The book contained records of Chen Ru's failure to pass the Celestial Ascension Tribulation. The people around him fell silent when they saw the records. Could it be that Chen Ru is a descendant of Chen Ru? Could it be that he's named Chen Ru to commemorate his ancestor? Soon, someone made such a guess. That's possible. If that's the case, it makes sense for this person to be able to use the peerless saber. Many people nodded in agreement. Umph. At this moment, Qin Yiru's two servants couldn't take it anymore. They snorted coldly in unison, and the surrounding air seemed to freeze at this moment. Our master is Qin Sandao Qin Yiru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. Don't make wild guesses if you are ignorant. As he finished speaking, the burly middle-aged man's tone was mixed with a bit of anger. Who said that failure to transcend the tribulation would definitely result in death? A bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well. The middle-aged man with a bamboo pole glanced at the surrounding people with disdain and mocked. Earlier, the group of people who had rushed over to join in the fun had learned about the identity of the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man from the few Saint Celestials who were lucky enough to survive. They knew they were the servants of the embroidered robed old man whose strength far surpassed eminent Celestials. The burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. For this reason, the crowd was wary of the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man. However, when they heard the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man's words, they were dumbfounded. He's really Qin Sandao Qin Yiru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. Failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? Regardless of whether it was the words of the burly middle-aged man or the bamboo middle-aged man at this moment, they were so shocked that the hearts of the group of people who came to join in the fun fiercely twitched. However, what shocked them the most was the skinny middle-aged man's words. Who said that failure to transcend the tribulation would definitely result in death? A bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well. While the words of the bamboo middle-aged man ridiculed them for being frogs at the bottom of a well, it seemed as though he had opened the door to a new world for them. Failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? The people in the surroundings, regardless of whether they were Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive earlier or those who had rushed over to join in the fun, shifted their gazes to the middle-aged man with a bamboo pole. Sir, you said failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? The middle-aged scholar who had mentioned Qin Yiru was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago asked respectfully as he looked at the bamboo-skinned middle-aged man. Although the few Saint Celestials who were lucky enough to survive did not mention the skinny middle-aged man's cultivation base, he knew the skinny middle-aged man's cultivation base. However, in his opinion, if one of the finely dressed old man's servants was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, there was no doubt the other servant was not weak as well. For this reason, he did not dare to be rude when he asked the skinny middle-aged man's question. When the middle-aged scholar asked the skinny middle-aged man's question, the crowd began to look at the skinny middle-aged man with a burning gaze. Of course, the skinny middle-aged man seemed to enjoy everyone's attention as he said matter-of-factly, when a powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage discovers he can't transcend the Celestial Ascension tribulation, there's still a chance for him to successfully detach his soul from his body and escape. And after his soul left his body and escaped, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the skinny middle-aged man began to talk about bodiless Celestials. He also mentioned that bodiless Celestials could not reincarnate, that bodiless Celestials had to face the bodiless Celestial tribulation every 1,000 years, and that bodiless Celestials were divided into 9 stages. Only after successfully transcending 10 bodiless Celestial tribulations would one be able to ascend a second time. The introduction by the middle-aged man overturned the understanding of the surrounding group of people, causing them to be stunned and unable to recover for a long time. Bodiless Celestials? They had to face 10 bodiless Celestial tribulations in 10,000 years? They could die at any time during this process? Only after successfully transcending 10 bodiless Celestial tribulations would one be able to ascend a second time and ascend to a Devata realm. A 1 tribulation bodiless Celestial whose strength was comparable to an ordinary powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage? A 2 tribulation bodiless Celestial whose strength was comparable to an eminent Celestial? A 3 tribulation bodiless Celestial? At this moment, the people who had survived the battle between Duan Lingtian and Qin Yiru felt as though their world had been turned upside down. A door to a new world was opening in front of them. As it turns out, bodiless Celestials still exist in this world. Bodiless Celestials are so strong that they're comparable to real Celestials. 3 tribulation bodiless Celestials are stronger than eminent Celestials. To think that I thought eminent Celestials were the strongest in the mundane realms. A frog at the bottom of a well. I was indeed a frog at the bottom of a well. Many people could not help but sigh when they finally regained their senses. So that's how it is. Calculating the time, it's been exactly 4,000 years since Qin Sandao, Qin Yiru, failed his heavenly tribulation. Since Lord Qin Yiru is still alive, it's only natural that he has overcome 4 bodiless celestial tribulations and become a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. The middle-aged scholar nodded his head in realization. A 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. At the same time, the few people who had survived the battle between Duan Lingtian and Qin Yiru finally understood what a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial was. It was as Qin Yiru had said. A 4 tribulation bodiless celestial was much stronger than an eminent celestial. Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the fire worship sect, the successor of the fog rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 absolute sect, and the sect leader of the 7 absolute sect, managed to come to a draw with Lord Qin Yiru. Doesn't this mean his strength is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial? Someone exclaimed in shock. Impossible. Lord Qin Yiru, didn't you say Duan Lingtian is only an eminent celestial? At his level, it's impossible for him to misjudge Duan Lingtian's cultivation base. Someone questioned. At the same time, one of Qin Yiru's 2 servants, the burly middle-aged man, scoffed before he said, only a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial would be able to tear a hole in the void. Only 4 tribulation bodiless celestials and above are able to tear space apart and leave cracks in the void. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Apart from that, no matter how powerful an ordinary 3 tribulation disbanded celestial is, it's impossible for him to tear open space and leave a crack in the void. Naturally, this applies to ordinary 3 tribulation bodiless celestials. 3 tribulation bodiless celestials who have obtained divine abilities or celestial supreme treasures from the Devata realms would be able to tear a hole in the void as well. The burly middle-aged man continued to say, with the help of divine abilities and celestial supreme treasures, his strength is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial or even stronger than a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. The burly middle-aged man paused for a moment before he looked at Duan Lingtian and said confidently, Duan Lingtian's cultivation base is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. Regardless of Duan Lingtian's cultivation base, the strength he displayed earlier is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. As soon as the burly middle-aged man finished speaking, everyone turned to look at the purple figure hovering above the huge pit. Duan Lingtian's strength is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial? Duan Lingtian. Meanwhile, Qin Yiru, a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial who had been deep in thought for a long time, finally regained his senses. When he looked at Duan Lingtian again, a hint of greed could be seen in his eyes. Chapter 2349. If I'm not mistaken, the assist-type divine ability you cast must be from the Devata realm. Qin Yiru, a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, said as he stared at Duan Lingtian. The greed in his eyes burned brighter and brighter. Although he sounded like he was asking a question, his tone was filled with certainty. He was certain this was because he had extended his divine consciousness earlier to investigate the surroundings. He discovered that the surrounding area was extremely dense. In the surrounding area, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of 10,000 miles had become extremely thin. It was similar to where he was currently. Based on this, he was certain the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding area was extremely dense. The heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding 10,000 miles had been completely devoured by Duan Lingtian earlier. Due to this reason, it had yet to fully recover. Naturally, Qin Yiru could roughly guess how much the world energy within a radius of 10,000 miles would increase a person's strength by when they were gathered together and bestowed upon him. It was not impossible for the heaven and earth spirit energy to raise the strength of an eminent celestial to the level of a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial in just a short time. Qin Yiru was shocked by how Duan Lingtian was able to devour the heaven and earth spirit energy in such a large area. He could tell the assist-type divine ability Duan Lingtian had mastered was not an ordinary divine ability. At the very least, it was not from the mundane realm. Devouring the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding area? Such an assist-type divine ability would not be an ordinary divine ability even in the Devata realms, let alone the mundane realms. It was most likely a high-grade divine ability. Greed rose in Qin Yiru's heart when he thought about this. He could not wait to take the assist-type divine ability for himself. Oh, you can even tell? Duan Lingtian glanced at Qin Yiru indifferently when he heard Qin Yiru's words. Humph. I'm a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. With my powerful divine consciousness, it's easy for me to probe your cultivation base. I'm certain you're only an eminent celestial, not a bodiless celestial. Qin Yi Ru scoffed. An eminent celestial strength is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial after casting an assist-type divine ability. No one would believe you if you say the assist-type divine ability you've mastered isn't from the Devata realms. Qin Yi Ru said confidently. He was certain he had guessed Duanling Tian. A divine ability from the Devata realm? Qin Yi Ru did not deliberately suppress his voice, so it clearly reached the ears of the group of people within 1,000 meters. For a moment, their pupils shrank, and a look of shock and disbelief appeared on their faces. Even Qin Yi Ru's 2 servants were dumbfounded by what they saw. Although their master had discovered Duanling Tian was an eminent celestial, they were certain their master had made a mistake or that Duanling Tian had used some technique to conceal his cultivation base. They did not expect Duanling Tian to be so confident. They did not expect Duanling Tian to be an eminent celestial. Moreover, according to their master, Duanling Tian's assist-type divine ability was from the Devata realms. Although the burly middle-aged man had mentioned the divine ability from the Devata realms to the people around him, he did not expect Duanling Tian to be so confident. Even in his wildest dreams, he did not expect Duanling Tian to be so confident. It was obvious Duanling Tian had not mastered an ordinary divine ability in the Devata realms. What a joke. An eminent celestial who cast an assist-type divine ability had the strength of a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. Such an assist-type divine ability would be extraordinary even in the Devata realms. The assist-type divine ability Duanling Tian has mastered must be extraordinary even in the Devata realms. Both the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man were shocked. Based on Master Qin Yi Ru's words, Duanling Tian has mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms? I thought Duanling Tian is a bodiless celestial as well. However, it seems like I was wrong. Duanling Tian is only an eminent celestial. The reason he's so strong is because he has mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. An assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms? It said that the movement divine ability Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, has mastered is also an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. Is it possible that Zoroastrianism has a way to obtain a divine ability from the Devata realms? After all, Duanling Tian was once a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Now that you mention it, it's possible. Meanwhile, a group of people who were standing 1,000 meters away from the Devata realms began to discuss among themselves. They suspected that the assist-type divine ability Duanling Tian had mastered from the Devata realms was most likely from Zoroastrianism. After all, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism had also mastered a movement divine ability from the Devata realms. Moreover, the movement divine ability that the sect leader of Zoroastrianism had mastered was widely acknowledged as the #1 movement divine ability in the Dao Martial Saint land. You're smart. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Duanling Tian smiled faintly. Based on his words, he confirmed Qin Yi Ru's guess. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, the crowd gasped in shock. Gasp. Gasp, 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 gasp. Gasps rang in the air from 1,000 meters away. It came from the group of people who were watching the show from afar. After they received confirmation from Duanling Tian, they could not help but gasp. Duanling Tian had really mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. For a time, many people's eyes lit up as they stared at Duanling Tian with greed. At this moment, it was as though they had become the hunters while Duanling Tian had become the prey. They had completely forgotten that Duanling Tian was not an easy target. After all, they did not have the ability to kill Duanling Tian. Greed was enough to make people lose their minds. This sentence was not false at all. As expected, after Qin Yi Ru received confirmation from Duanling Tian, his eyes lit up like 2 bright stars in the night sky. In the next moment, Duanling Tian. Qin Yi Ru looked at Duanling Tian condescendingly as he said in a clear voice, I have to admit that your combat strength is not inferior to mine after you cast your assist-type divine ability. However, I didn't use my full strength earlier. What I cast earlier was the weakest of my 3 saber techniques, the Peerless Saber. After the Peerless Saber, there's the World Cleansing Saber and the World Annihilating Saber. If I cast the World Cleansing Saber, even if you don't die, you'll be severely injured. If I cast the World Annihilating Saber, you'll definitely die. Qin Yi Ru's words were filled with confidence. As he spoke, he seemed to have confirmed one thing for himself. He thought Duanling Tian had unleashed his full strength without holding back earlier. That was why he was evenly matched with the Peerless Saber that he had cast. So, Duanling Tian asked indifferently when he heard Qin Yi Ru's words. If you're willing to swear on the lightning penalty oath that you'll share your assist-type divine ability with me after you've mastered it, I, Qin Ru, a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial, will swear on the lightning penalty oath that I'll spare your life. At this point, Qin Ru didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his intention of saying those words. His purpose for doing this was also very simple. He wanted to obtain Duanling Tian's assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. If I can master that assist-type divine ability, I don't have to master it to its peak. As long as I can master it to the same level as Duanling Tian, I won't be afraid even if I have to face a 5-tribulation bodiless celestial. Thinking of this, Qin Ru couldn't help but feel excited. In his opinion, Duanling Tian was in a dilemma. Under his threat, Duanling Tian would definitely obey his request and swear on the lightning penalty oath obediently in order to survive. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. At the same time, the group of people who were 1,000 meters away also had their eyes trained on Duanling Tian. They were curious. Would Duanling Tian obediently obey Qin Ru's request? Naturally, they thought Duanling Tian had done his best. Earlier, Duanling Tian had unleashed his full strength while Qin Ru had held back. Therefore, it should not be difficult for Qin Ru to kill Duanling Tian. However, as soon as Qin Ru finished speaking, everyone turned to look at Duanling Tian curiously. Ah! Duanling Tian suddenly burst out laughing as though he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Qin Ru's expression darkened. He was about to lose his temper when he heard Duanling Tian's words. Duanling Tian said mockingly with a disdainful expression on his face, "What world-cleansing saber? What world annihilation saber? It's nothing more than a petty trick like your peerless saber. Do you think I've unleashed my full strength earlier?" Duanling Tian said mockingly as he looked at Qin Ru. What do you mean? Qin Ru's expression changed when he heard Duanling Tian's words and sensed Duanling Tian's confidence. An ominous feeling rose in his heart. What do I mean? Duanling Tian smiled disdainfully. He raised his hand and a beam of white light shot out of his palm before it transformed into a 3-foot-long sword that emitted a sharp aura. In the next moment, sword-wielding technique. Duanling Tian's eyes turned cold as the 3-foot-long sword in his hand shot out like a meteor toward Qin Ru. Swoosh. The sound of the sword whistling was short-lived. Rip, rip, rip. Chapter 2350. Previously, Duanling Tian had only casually defended himself against Qin Ru's peerless saber. He did not even use any martial techniques or divine abilities. For this reason, Duanling Tian did not feel angry when he heard Qin Ru's threat. Instead, he laughed as though he had just heard a joke. To him, Qin Ru's threat was indeed the biggest joke in the world. Did Qin Ru think Duanling Tian had used his full strength earlier? Little did Qin Ru know that Duanling Tian's strength was at least 10 times or even 100 times stronger than Qin Ru's sword-wielding art. At this moment, Duanling Tian no longer intended to toy with Qin Ru. He immediately used the sword-wielding art, the third stage of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword. Swoosh. The 3-foot-long sword that was formed from celestial origin energy mixed with saint origin energy tore through the air like a shooting star in the night sky, dazzling everyone's eyes in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. It was like a shooting star that tore through the sky. Everywhere it passed, space shook and collapsed, and it left behind numerous narrow, long and savage spatial rifts that were like numerous thick black pythons. Although these void cracks were constantly healing after they were opened, they were too long and narrow. Therefore, it would take at least 15 minutes for them to completely heal. The cracks in the void were not something the cracks in the void could compare to. The former were like thick black pythons while the latter were like small black snakes. The former would take about 15 minutes to heal while the latter would only take a blink of an eye to heal. Impossible. Qin Ru cried out in shock and disbelief when he saw Duanling Tian unleashing the sword-wielding art and easily tearing open the terrifying spatial rifts in the air. His expression changed drastically, and a hint of disbelief could be seen on his face. At this moment, his tone was mixed with endless terror. It was as if the end of the world had arrived and he was about to die. Qin Ru's reaction was, naturally, due to the long and narrow crack in the void that Duanling Tian's sword had left behind. He could tell Duanling Tian's attack was far stronger than what he could withstand. His attack is comparable to a 5-tribulation bodiless celestial's attack. The moment this thought appeared in his mind, Qin Ru also noticed that he had been locked onto by the sword chi. He knew that he couldn't avoid it, and in his shock and anger, he strangely calmed down. Saber of Purification. After calming down, Qin Yi Ru immediately unleashed the energy that he had been accumulating for a long time. The moment Qin Yi Ru's body was completely enveloped by the cold aura, his entire body blossomed with dazzling light like the sun. With Qin Yi Ru's body as the center, an extremely sharp energy swept out in all directions. It was as if the saber god was enraged and had descended to punish the world, wanting to exterminate all living beings in this world. If someone was above Qin Yi Ru and looked down, they would be able to see. A 360-degree shockwave with Qin Yi Ru at the center seemed to have transformed into a saber of purification. It shot out countless saber rays in all directions as though it was going to purify everything. Wherever the shockwave from the saber light passed, the void would crumble. Cracks would appear in the void and spread in all directions. Oh no! As soon as Qin Yi Ru unleashed the blade of purification, the expressions of his two servants changed drastically. They immediately soared into the air and shot toward the horizon as fast as they could. It was as though something terrifying would happen if they continued to stay where they were. Saber of Annihilation. After casting the Saber of Purification, Qin Yi Ru did not hesitate to cast the most powerful saber attack he could muster. The name Saber of Annihilation alone gave people the feeling that it could destroy the heavens and earth. Buzz, 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 buzz. Along with the buzzing sound of the saber, Qin Yi Ru's energy skyrocketed. Finally, it transformed into thousands of saber rays that merged into one and transformed into a gigantic saber. From afar, it looked as though it could pierce through the heavens and earth. It could hold up the heavens and stand on the earth. Rip, rip, rip. At the same time, countless cracks appeared in the void around the gigantic saber. Although they were slightly narrower than before, they were not as wide as the cracks Duanling Tian left behind when he wielded his sword in the air. Saber of Annihilation. As soon as the shockwave from the world-cleansing saber collided with Duanling Tian's 3-foot-long sword, the gigantic saber that had appeared above Qin Yi Ru's head began to descend. Buzz. The gigantic saber seemed to be able to tear apart half of the sky as it slashed down. It seemed as though it contained boundless energy as it targeted Duanling Tian. Buzz, 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 buzz. Wherever the gigantic saber passed, it seemed as though thousands of saber rays had struck at the same time. The ear-piercing sound of the saber rang continuously. Rip, rip, rip. As the gigantic saber slashed down, the originally calm void began to crack inch by inch, leaving behind countless tiny cracks in the void. In just a blink of an eye, the cracks had closed up again. The Saber of Annihilation had opened up the heavens and earth. Black Turtle's Barrier. In the face of Qin Yi Ru's Saber of Purification, Duanling Tian's energy surged out of his body and formed the silhouette of a gigantic black turtle around him and the three women to protect them. He did not need to use any martial tactics or divine abilities to block Qin Yi Ru's peerless saber. Now that he had cast his defensive divine ability, the Black Turtle's Barrier, it was not difficult for him to block Qin Yi Ru's Saber of Purification. The Saber of Purification's energy was not much stronger than the peerless saber because it was too scattered. As for the Saber of Annihilation that opened up the heavens and earth, this is the Saber of Annihilation? That's all there is to it. Duanling Tian sneered as he thought to himself. Instantly, the 3-foot-long blade that he controlled with the Imperial Sword technique suddenly changed directions and met the enormous blade light that descended from the sky and seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth apart. Whoosh! Wherever the 3-foot-long sword passed, long and narrow spatial cracks would appear. It was as if the space was a fragile piece of paper that could be easily sliced and torn apart. Waves of ice-cold and sharp aura continuously swept out from the 3-feet-long green sword. Nothing could be more terrifying than this. When Duanling Tian used the sword-wielding art to block Qin Yi Ru's World Destroyer Saber, Qin Yi Ru's World-Cleansing Saber collided with the black tortoise's silhouette that enveloped Duanling Tian, Ke, and the others. Immediately, boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by a series of earth-shattering explosions, the black tortoise's silhouette trembled violently. In the end, the World-Cleansing Saber did not manage to break through the black tortoise's silhouette's defense. It did not manage to break through Duanling Tian's defensive divine ability, the Black Tortoise's Barrier, until the moment it was destroyed. Naturally, the World-Cleansing Saber was only destroyed when it swept toward Duanling Tian. In another direction, the World-Cleansing Saber continued to expand. In just a blink of an eye, it annihilated the group of people who were watching the show from 1,000 meters away. These people did not even have the chance to react before they were killed. That was not all. After the World-Cleansing Saber annihilated these people, it continued to sweep in all directions in the city as though it was going to annihilate all the living beings in the city. Swoosh, At the same time, the 3-foot-long blade that Duanling Tian controlled with the sword-wielding art that seemed to be aided by the gods collided with the world annihilation saber that seemed as though it could split heaven and earth apart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After a brief stalemate, the world-cleansing saber destroyed the world-cleansing saber. The gigantic world-cleansing saber could not withstand a single blow from Duanling Tian's 3-foot-long sword. It was annihilated in just a blink of an eye. They're not even on the same level. Although Chen Yiru had prepared himself mentally, he could not help but feel despair when he saw the outcome of the world-cleansing saber after he cast his 2 most powerful saber techniques. At the same time, he roared in his heart. How did Duanling Tian obtain such a heaven-defying assist-type divine ability? Chen Yiru finally realized. Duanling Tian's assist-type divine ability was even more terrifying than he had imagined. At this moment he realized something. Previously, Duanling Tian had only casually gathered his energy to block the world-cleansing saber. He did not use any martial tactics or divine abilities at all. If Duanling Tian had used any martial tactics or divine abilities, his strength would be comparable to a 5-tribulation bodiless celestial. The numerous spatial rifts that would take approximately 15 minutes to completely heal were once again reflected in Chen Yiru's eyes, causing him to be completely disheartened. Chen Yiru did not expect Duanling Tian to be so powerful. Although Duanling Tian had displayed his true strength, it was not his true strength. He had not even used the 4th stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword, the Sword Heart Illumination, to become one with the sword. Swoosh. Chen Yiru closed his eyes in despair when he saw the world-cleansing saber that had crushed his world-cleansing saber. It was as though he was waiting for death to decide his fate. My lord. Chapter 2351. Swoosh. Like a meteor streaking across the night sky, the sword light locked onto Chen Yiru and whistled through the air, getting closer and closer to Chen Yiru. 100 meters. 50 meters. 20 meters. When the 3-foot-long sword was only a foot away from Chen Yiru, it suddenly stopped in a way that completely ignored inertia and transcended reality. It floated in the void and emitted waves of cold and sharp sword qi. Chen Yiru could not help but open his eyes when he sensed the ice-cold sword qi surging toward him. He discovered that the sword ray had pierced through the air. Duanling Tian's 3-foot-long blade was floating between his brows, and it was only a foot away from him. If it moved a little closer, it would be enough to kill him. You didn't kill me? When Chen Yiru thought of this, he immediately looked at Duanling Tian with a hint of bewilderment in his eyes. He no longer cared about the joy he felt from surviving the calamity. Naturally, there was a hint of dread in his eyes. Duanling Tian's strength had terrified Chen Yiru so much that he no longer dared to provoke Duanling Tian. In his opinion, Duanling Tian was no longer an eminent celestial. He was a 5-tribulation bodiless celestial. Even an ordinary 5-tribulation bodiless celestial might not be as strong as Duanling Tian. Why didn't you kill me? Chen Yiru asked in a hoarse voice as he looked at Duanling Tian. I didn't kill you because I wanted to give you a choice. Duanling Tian did not beat around the bush as he said, if you swear on the lightning penalty oath and acknowledge me as your master, I'll spare your life. However, if you're unwilling, I won't force you. I'll give you a quick death. Swoosh. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, Chen Yiru's eyes widened in anger as he narrowed his eyes. Impossible. Chen Yiru cried out without hesitation. I'd rather die than be humiliated. How can I, a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial, submit to a mere eminent celestial like you? A 4-tribulation bodiless celestial had the pride of a 4-tribulation bodiless celestial. No matter how much Chen Yiru didn't want to die, he couldn't get over the hurdle in his heart. He wasn't willing to recognize someone as his master and be their servant. You're a man of integrity. Duanling Tian sneered as killing intent flashed in his eyes. In that case, I'll give you a quick death. I'll use my strongest attack to end your life. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, he stepped forward again. To a certain extent, Duanling Tian respected Chen Yiru for his unyielding character. For this reason, Duanling Tian decided to use his strongest attack to end Chen Yiru's life to show his respect for Chen Yiru. His strongest attack? Chen Yiru's heart skipped a beat when he heard Duanling Tian's words. Based on his words, the attack that destroyed my apocalypse saber isn't his strongest attack? How's this possible? The strength of that attack is comparable to a 5-tribulation bodiless celestial's attack. Moreover, not all 5-tribulation bodiless celestials are capable of such a powerful attack. Chen Yiru was still in shock when he heard Duanling Tian's words. Duanling Tian's body suddenly shone brightly as though it was as bright as the sun and the moon. Then thousands of sword rays shot out from his body, as if they were coming out from every pore on his body. In the next moment, Duanling Tian's body gradually melted as the myriad of sword rays appeared. In the end, he merged with the myriad of sword rays. At this moment, it seemed as though Duanling Tian had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the sword rays that were gathering at an unbelievable speed. Whoosh! In just a blink of an eye, the sword rays disappeared and was replaced by a milky white, 3-foot-long sword. From afar it looked like an ordinary sword. All of a sudden, buzz! Along with a soft sound, the 3-foot-long blade that was suspended in the air swung down at an unhurried speed. At this time, not to mention Qin Yiru, even Qin Yiru's 2 servants could easily see the trajectory of the 3-foot-long sword. Swoosh, swoosh. Accompanied by the sound of something being torn apart, the 3-foot-long sword seemed to be casually swinging through the air, leaving behind a long and narrow crack in the void. As soon as the spatial crack appeared, Qin Yiru and his 2 servants narrowed their eyes in unison. This was because the tear in the void was much narrower and longer than the tear in the void that Duanling Tian had created when he wielded his sword. In fact, it was twice as long as the tear in the void. It'll take at least 30 minutes for the tear in the void to completely heal, right? The thought popped up in Qin Yiru's mind. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, his expression changed drastically. It seems like only a 6th tribulation bodiless celestial or above would be able to create such a tear in the void, right? This is his strongest attack. It's comparable to a 6th tribulation bodiless celestial's attack? Qin Yiru felt his scalp go numb when he thought about this. Heavens! Duanling Tian's cultivation base was only an eminent celestial, but when he cast his assist-type divine ability and his sword technique, his attack was comparable to a 6th tribulation bodiless celestial. Is his sword technique from the Devata realm as well? For a moment, Qin Yiru couldn't help but think. That's not right. He's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 absolute sect. The previous successor of the Fog Rain progeny was Feng Qingyang, the prodigy sword saint. Is it possible that he's Feng Qingyang's successor? If that's the case, it makes sense. After all, Feng Qingyang was a monstrous genius back then. It's said that when he was an eminent celestial, he had killed an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial when he was close to ascending. If Duanling Tian is Feng Qingyang's successor, it wouldn't be strange for him to possess strength comparable to a 6th tribulation bodiless celestial when he was only an eminent celestial. After all, Feng Qingyang was a monstrous sword cultivator who had killed an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial when he was only an eminent celestial. Many thoughts flashed through Qin Yiru's mind at this moment. A hint of reverence could be seen in his eyes when he thought about the prodigy sword saint Feng Qingyang. Qin Yiru, I'll use my strongest attack to end your life today. At the same time, Duanling Tian's voice rang in Qin Yiru's ears again, causing chills to run up his spine. The voice came from the sword hovering in the air in the distance. At this moment, Duanling Tian had transformed into a sword. He was the sword and the sword was him. Wait. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, the 3-foot-long blade trembled violently. Just as it was about to strike, Qin Yiru hastily stopped Duanling Tian. The 3-foot-long sword paused for a moment. Duanling Tian, are you the successor of Senior Feng Qingyang, the prodigy sword saint, the former successor of the Fog Rain progeny of the 7 absolute sect? Qin Yiru asked after taking a deep breath. So what if I am? Duanling Tian's indifferent voice rang from the 3-foot-long sword. The sword technique you're using, is it Senior Feng Qingyang's ultimate technique? Qin Yiru asked again. Since you're about to die, there's no harm in telling you. I'm indeed Senior Feng Qingyang's successor. The sword technique I'm using is also from Senior Feng Qingyang's legacy. Duanling Tian admired Qin Yiru's integrity from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, he would not have bothered to waste his breath on Qin Yiru. He would have killed Qin Yiru with his sword. However, what Duanling Tian did not expect was that Qin Yiru would not hesitate to kill Qin Yiru. As soon as Duanling Tian finished speaking, Qin Yiru immediately swore on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duanling Tian as his master. Duanling Tian was still in a daze when he saw this. Wasn't Qin Yiru supposed to have integrity? Wasn't he supposed to rather die than submit? Could it be that Qin Yiru was putting on an act earlier? Was he a person who was afraid of death? Duanling Tian was stunned. Ke, Duan Xiling and Gan Ruyen were stunned as well. Qin Yiru's 2 servants were stunned as well. Master. He swore on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duanling Tian as his master? The burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man exchanged a look. They could see the shock and disbelief in each other's eyes. As Chen Yiru's servants, they knew Chen Yiru's temperament very well. They knew Chen Yiru was a person who valued his dignity more than his own life. For this reason, Chen Yiru had expressed his stance earlier. He would rather die than serve Duan Lingtian as his master. Naturally, they were not surprised by this. However, Chen Yiru's sudden change of heart after speaking to Duan Lingtian and swearing on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master shocked them. They were even more shocked than Duan Lingtian and the three women by Duan Lingtian's side. "I thought you were a man of integrity. As it turns out, you're just a coward." At this moment, the 3-foot-long sword that was hovering in the air disappeared, and Duan Lingtian reappeared. A hint of disdain could be seen in his eyes as he looked at Chen Yiru. "It's not shameful to serve Senior Feng Qingyang's successor as my master." Chen Yiru shook his head nonchalantly in the face of Duan Lingtian's disdain. Then he stood up straight and bowed respectfully at Duan Lingtian. Chen Yiru greets master. Chapter 2352. Senior Feng Qingyang? Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow as he studied Chen Yiru, who had just risen to his feet. He saw a hint of reverence in the depths of Chen Yiru's eyes. However, Duan Lingtian could see that Chen Yiru's eyes were filled with reverence. He knew the reverence in Chen Yiru's eyes was not directed at him. At this moment, Duan Lingtian realized Chen Yiru had changed his mind and sworn on the lightning penalty oath because of Senior Feng Qingyang. "Greetings, master." Chen Yiru's two servants, the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man, stepped forward and bowed respectfully at Duan Lingtian when they saw Chen Yiru had acknowledged Duan Lingtian as his master. Duan Lingtian was naturally their master as well. However, from the beginning until the end, Duan Lingtian did not even look at them. Duan Lingtian looked at Ke, Duan Xiling and Gan Ruyen and said with a faint smile on his face, "Let's return to the Zoroastrianism." The moment Duan Lingtian's words left his mouth, he did not wait for the three women to reply. With a raise of his hand, a vast and majestic invisible energy swept out and shrouded the three women. It brought them to the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land at an extremely fast speed. He was like a cannonball that had been shot out of the barrel. Swoosh. Although Duan Lingtian did not cast his movement divine ability, his speed was comparable to a 4 bodiless celestial with the help of the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. In just a blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian and the three women had already turned into tiny black dots in Chen Yiru and the others' eyes. "Let's go!" Chen Yiru shouted as he brought the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man to chase after Duan Lingtian at an extremely fast speed. During this time he cast all sorts of movement techniques. However, in the end, his speed was only on par with Duan Lingtian. "Father, you were too awesome just now. That old man is so strong, but he was actually defeated by you, and he was even willing to recognize you as his master." Duan Xiling, who was being carried by Duan Lingtian, had an excited expression on her face as she gestured to Duan Lingtian. It was as if the one who had defeated Chen Yiru and forced Chen Yiru to submit to him was not her father, but herself. Although Ke didn't say anything, she looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes full of worship. "Xiling, cultivate well. Sooner or later you'll be as strong as father." Duan Lingtian said with a smile as he patted Duan Xiling's head. Whether it was his daughter, Duan Xiling, or his wife, Ke's admiring gaze, Duan Lingtian still enjoyed it even though he was already used to it. Gan Ruyen stood at the side as she looked at the happy family of three. A hint of disappointment could be seen in her eyes. She felt out of place at this moment. It's only been a few years, but his strength has already risen to such a level. Gan Ruyen's heartbeat quickened when she thought about Duan Lingtian's current strength. She recalled the past. The purple-clad young man was as weak as an ant in front of her. He could only watch helplessly as she took her sister, his wife, away. Currently, the purple-clad young man's strength had far surpassed her. Perhaps she was also as weak as an ant in his eyes. He's returning to Zoroastrianism? Is he planning to look for the sect leader to avenge Huolao? Gan Ruyen speculated inwardly. However, Gan Ruyen did not expect this. Duan Lingtian's return to Zoroastrianism was not only to look for the sect leader of Zoroastrianism to avenge Huolao, but it was also to annihilate Zoroastrianism. This was because he had learned about his other identity after coming to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. He was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. He was also the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. As the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, while he was honored, He was also burdened with a heavy responsibility. Duan Tian had already made up his mind. He wanted to use the remaining time he had in the mundane realm to annihilate the three great sects before he ascended to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. He wanted to avenge the members of the Seven Absolute sect who had been killed by the three great sections. I didn't expect him to be the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. At that moment, Gan Ruyen couldn't help but recall the incident that left her bewildered. Previously, when Duan Tian had said he was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, she had thought Duan Tian was just bluffing. However, before Qin Yiru acknowledged Duan Tian as his master, she had asked Duan Tian if he had inherited the Sword Dao Martial Saint Feng Qingyang's legacy. She was only certain after Duan Tian confirmed it. Duan Tian was indeed the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. Did he join Zoroastrianism with the intention of investigating Zoroastrianism? Gan Ruyen shook her head when she thought of this. That can't be right. He must have joined Zoroastrianism for Kerr. Even if he's the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, it's useless for him to join Zoroastrianism. If Master and the other members of the sect find out he's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, I'm sure they'll be shocked. If he reveals his identity as the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, the people in the sect will definitely want to kill him. However, with his current strength, he doesn't even have to fear the sect leader. I wonder if there are any bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism as well? Although Gan Ruyen knew about bodiless celestials when she was still in Zoroastrianism, she did not know if there were any bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism. If there are, I wonder how strong they are and how strong they are compared to him. If they're stronger than him, I'm afraid he'll... Gan Ruyen did not dare to continue thinking as she looked at Duan Tian's back. Not long after Duan Tian, Qin Yiru, and the others left, many wretched figures crawled out of the ruins of the city they were originally in. Their eyes and faces were filled with terror. Previously, before they could even react to what was going on, the saber lights that had turned into shock waves that filled the sky had already surged over like a mountain torrent, completely submerging them. If it were not for the fact that they were strong and lucky, they would have died in the ruins like the others. After one of the people crawled out of the ruins, he rose into the air and looked around. He was shocked to find that the once bustling city had been reduced to ruins. There was not a single intact building in sight. In fact, even the area around the city that had turned into ruins was now a scene of desolation. It was as though they had just gone through a devastating storm. What the hell is going on? I don't know. The saber lights that filled the sky seemed to be attacking indiscriminately. When they engulfed us, they actually destroyed the entire city. Such a terrifying attack. Who could have unleashed such a terrifying attack? A powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage? An eminent celestial? No. Even an eminent celestial doesn't have such strength. I've read an ancient book that analyzed the strength of an eminent celestial. It's impossible for an eminent celestial to be so strong. It's only possible if more than 10 eminent celestials attacked at the same time. More than 10 eminent celestials attacked at the same time? How's that possible? It's rare to see even one eminent celestial, let alone more than 10 of them. For the survivors of this ruined city, what happened today was a mystery that would never be solved. However, there was one thing they were certain of. The saber aura that swept across the sky and drowned the entire city like a mountain torrent was definitely not the power of nature. It was man-made. What kind of person could have such a strong power? They had no idea. In fact, the culprit behind the destruction of the city was Qin Yiru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. Qin Yiru's world-cleansing saber was an indiscriminate attack. It enveloped the entire city and killed the people closest to it within a radius of 1,000 meters. Then it swept through the entire city. Almost no one within a radius of 1,000 meters survived. In other places, only a few people with a higher cultivation base and better luck managed to survive. For this reason, apart from Duan Tian and Qin Yiru, nobody knew about the conflict between Duan Tian and Qin Yiru. As long as they didn't mention it, this was destined to become a case without any clues. Currently, Duan Tian and Qin Yiru were making their way to the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Swoosh. Duan Tian traveled at full speed with the 3 women in tow. Whenever the energy in his body began to weaken, he would cast the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, to replenish his celestial origin energy so that it would be at its peak. Due to this reason, his speed was extremely fast. However, as time passed, Duan Tian discovered the aftereffects of continuously casting the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. Casting the elementary devouring tactic once only consumed a little of his spiritual energy. On the other hand, using the elementary devouring technique over and over again consumed a lot of mental energy, which was a huge burden on his mental energy. Just as well, I have some questions to ask him. Duan Tian muttered to himself. He allowed his celestial origin energy to weaken until it returned to normal. He no longer cast the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. Chapter 2353. Since Duan Tian had slowed down, Chen Yiru, the four tribulation bodiless celestial, caught up to him. However, he did not dare to overtake Duan Tian. Instead, he slowed down and followed closely behind Duan Tian. After all, Duan Tian was his master. I heard them talking about you earlier. They said you used to have another name. Chen Sandao? Duan Tian asked as they traveled. From the beginning until the end, he did not even turn to look at Chen Yiru. It was as though he was talking to the air. If it had been anyone else who spoke to Chen Yiru in such a manner, Chen Yiru would have flown into a rage. However, he did not dare to act impudently in front of Duan Tian. He was as docile as a cat as he nodded obediently. Yes, master. From now on I'll call you Sandao. You don't have any objections, right? Duan Tian asked indifferently. I don't dare. Since he had sworn on the lightning penalty oath to acknowledge Duan Tian as his master, naturally, he did not dare to disobey Duan Tian. Let alone Duan Tian calling him Sandao, even if Duan Tian called him idiot and asked him if the name he gave him sounded good, he could only say it sounded good. I have some questions for you. Duan Tian asked again. Please ask, master. Chen Yiru replied respectfully. It was as though he was going to tell Duan Tian everything he knew. How many bodiless celestials like you are in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Duan Tian asked the first question he wanted to know. How many bodiless celestials were there in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? If it was not for Liao Nai Jiang, the master of the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, Duan Tian would not have known about the existence of bodiless celestials in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. In the past, just like most people, he thought eminent celestials were at the peak of the mundane realms. It was not until Liao Nai Jiang appeared that he learned about bodiless celestials. In the past, he was just a frog in a well. Master, it's not easy to answer your question. Chen Yiru did not expect Duan Tian to ask such a question. He smiled wryly and said, I'm not sure how many bodiless celestials there are in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, I'm certain there are at least hundreds of them. Ling Tian? Aren't you a bodiless celestial as well? Duan Tian Fun. Duan Tian, naturally Duan Tian, Duan Tian said Chen Duan Tian, Duan Tian. Master, although I'm a bodiless celestial, I don't have many interactions with other bodiless celestials. Among the bodiless celestials who are still alive, some have failed their heavenly tribulations less than 1,000 years ago while some have failed their heavenly tribulations more than 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Most of them don't know each other, Chen Yiru explained patiently. Ever since I failed my heavenly tribulation and became a bodiless celestial, I've only met about 10 bodiless celestials. Usually, I travel and cultivate in closed-door cultivation while waiting for the bodiless celestial tribulation that occurs once every 1,000 years. Chen Yiru paused for a moment before he added inwardly, what a coincidence. I was so unlucky to have met you, but I failed. Naturally, he did not dare to say these words out loud. I see. Duan Tian was enlightened when he heard Chen Yiru's explanation. He asked, does this mean bodiless celestials like you often travel in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Yes. Chen Yiru nodded. Apart from cultivating, we travel the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. If that's the case, why are so few people aware of your existence? Duan Tian asked again. This was the thing that puzzled him the most. Before he returned to the upper province and met Liao Nai Jiang, the master of the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, just like most people, he was unaware of the existence of bodiless celestials. He thought those who stood at the peak of the mundane realms were eminent celestials. When he was in the bustling city earlier, it was apparent the people from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land were unaware of the existence of bodiless celestials as well. Duan Tian still remembered the shocked expressions on their faces when they learned about the existence of bodiless celestials. Master, it's not that we intentionally hide our identities as bodiless celestials. It's just that the dragons and the phoenixes have forbidden us from doing so. Qin Yiru smiled wryly. The dragons and the phoenixes? Duan Lingtian frowned. They've forbidden us from doing so? Moreover, it's directed at bodiless celestials? As far as I know, although the dragons and the phoenixes can be considered as powerful forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, they're still far from being comparable to the three great sects, right? Duan Lingtian asked. He had heard about the dragons and the phoenixes in the past. He knew they were famous forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Even when compared to the three strongest sects, they were only slightly weaker. However, even then they were still not comparable to the three great sections. What did Qin Yiru say to him? Qin Yiru said, yes. The dragons and the phoenixes had forbidden bodiless celestials. One had to know that in this world where the strong were respected, if one wanted to impose a ban on a person or a group of people, one must first possess strength that surpassed that person or group of people. Otherwise, who would be willing to listen to you? Who are you? Currently, the strongest group in the mundane realms was undoubtedly bodiless celestials. If a bodiless celestial said they were the second strongest group in the mundane realms, no one would dare to say they were the strongest. A three-tribulation bodiless celestial was stronger than an eminent celestial who was about to ascend. Even an eminent celestial would not be able to kill a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. When a fourth tribulation bodiless celestial attacked, he could easily shatter the void and leave cracks in the void. It was a power that only celestials could possess. Let alone 5 tribulation bodiless celestials, 6 tribulation bodiless celestials, 7 tribulation bodiless celestials, 8 tribulation bodiless celestials, and 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. Naturally, 9 tribulation bodiless celestials were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Master, those who say the dragons and the phoenixes are inferior to the three great sects are just ordinary people. The dragons and the phoenixes purposely mislead the people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, Qin Yiru said with a wry smile. In fact, in the entire upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, the phoenixes and the dragons are the strongest. To a certain extent, the three great sects are merely puppets, supported by them. Duan Lingtian was taken aback by Qin Yiru's words. He felt like a door to a new world was opening for him. The three great sects? Puppets supported by the dragons and the phoenixes? Duan Lingtian looked at Qin Yiru in confusion. He really could not figure it out. How did the three great sects become puppets supported by the dragons and the phoenixes? In the history of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were many cases where the dragons and the phoenixes had conflicts with the three great sections. Of course, even the current sect masters of the three great sects don't know that the three great sects were supported by the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan in the beginning and have grown to this stage today. However, that's the truth. This is not a secret in the world of bodiless celestials. Qin Yiru said. When he saw the frown on Duan Lingtian's face deepened, Qin Yiru continued to say, in the beginning the three great sects were close to the dragons and the phoenixes. However, after the 10th generation of dragons and the phoenixes were passed down, they completely cut ties with the dragons and the phoenixes. At that time, the three great sects were strong enough to stand on their own. With the help of the dragons and the phoenixes, they became the three strongest sects in the Dao Martial Saint Land. When Qin Yiru finished speaking, he looked at Duan Lingtian again. Master, as the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, you should be very familiar with the history of the Seven Absolute sect. During the era of Sword Saint Feng Qingyang, the former successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, the Seven Absolute sect was stronger than the three great sections. Do you know why the Seven Absolute sect didn't annihilate the three great sects in the end? If Senior Feng Qingyang had made a move at that time, the three great sects wouldn't have been able to escape death even if they joined forces. A hint of reverence could be seen in Qin Yiru's eyes when he spoke. It was obvious the reverence in his eyes was directed at Sword Saint Feng Qingyang. Didn't they say Senior Feng Qingyang didn't care about annihilating the three great sects? There are also some who say that Senior Feng Qingyang wants to leave the three great sects behind to train the future disciples of the Seven Absolute sect so that they won't have any opponents. Duan Lingtian told him the information he had heard in the restaurant in that city. As for what Qin Yiru had said, as the current successor of the Seven Absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, and the current sect master of the Seven Absolute sect, he should know the history of the Seven Absolute sect very well. However, he did not know how to respond. Could he tell Qin Yiru? A few hours ago he did not even know about his relationship with the Seven Absolute sect? Master, what you said is merely a rumor spread by the people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Chen Yiru's eyes lit up as he said, "The truth is, the reason why Senior Feng Qingyang didn't destroy the three great sects wasn't because he was holding back. It was because the dragons and phoenixes interfered. In order to stop Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and phoenixes even sent many bodiless celestials. There are even 7 and 8 tribulation bodiless celestials among them." Hiss. Upon hearing Chen Yiru's words, Duan Lingtian gasped. Chapter 2354. There's an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial in the dragons and phoenixes? Duan Lingtian looked at Chen Yiru in shock. An 8 tribulation bodiless celestial was the closest bodiless celestial to a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Even if Duan Lingtian was confident he would be able to fight a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial after comprehending the 5th stage of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the heart and sword amalgamation, and comprehending the other divine abilities to their limits, however, he did not think he would be able to fight an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. Even if he successfully comprehended the 5th stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword, the heart and sword is one, and comprehended the other divine abilities to their limits, he felt he was, at most, comparable to a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial. He did not think he was comparable to an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. At the very least, he did not think he would be able to fight an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial before he ascended to a Devata realm and became a true celestial. In that era, there were 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes. Chen Yiru nodded respectfully before he continued to say, "Even in this era, I suspect there are 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes as well." Gasp. Duan Lingtian gasped when he heard Chen Yiru's words. In this era, there were 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes? Needless to say, this was extremely shocking news to him. When Duan Lingtian was still in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, he had learned about the 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. In the history of the devil clans, there were only a few 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. In other words, the strongest person in the devil clans was an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. This was because it was extremely difficult to become a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Bodiless celestials from the devil clans were similar to bodiless celestials from the human clans. It was difficult to become a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial from the devil clans. For this reason, the strongest person in the human world was basically an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. But now Chen Yiru was speaking to him. In this era, the devil clans and phoenix clans should have 8 tribulation bodiless celestials as well. How could he not be shocked? If there's an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial in the dragons and phoenixes clans, it's possible for them to ban the bodiless celestials from the Dao Martial Saint Land. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. At this moment, Chen Yiru's voice rang in the air. Since there are 8 tribulation bodiless celestials among the dragons and phoenixes, none of the bodiless celestials, including me, dare to disobey their orders. After all, in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were many cases where bodiless celestials were killed for disobeying the rules set by the dragons and phoenixes. What Chen Yiru said was similar to what Duan Lingtian was thinking. The dragon and phoenix clans were strong enough to intimidate the bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Therefore, the bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land had to obey the rules set by the dragon and phoenix clans. Zoroastrianism. Were puppets of the dragons and phoenixes? Gan Ruyen, who was being carried by Duan Lingtian, had clearly heard the conversation between Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru. For this reason, an expression of shock and disbelief could be seen on her face. The 3 strongest sects in the Dao Martial Saint Land were puppets of the dragons and phoenixes? As a member of Zoroastrianism, Gan Ruyen found it difficult to accept this fact. However, she also felt that Chen Yiru was lying. There was no reason for Chen Yiru to lie since he had sworn on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master. It was impossible for him to lie to Duan Lingtian. How many bodiless celestials are there in the 3 great sects? Duan Lingtian asked Chen Yiru again, changing the topic. Of course, the shock brought to him by the dragon and phoenix clans had not subsided even until now. There are no bodiless celestials in the 3 great sections. Chen Yiru shook his head. No bodiless celestials? Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he looked at Chen Yiru again. He said in disbelief, "You're right. How's that possible? As far as I know, many people from the Zoroastrianism have failed the celestial ascension tribulation. Don't tell me none of them became bodiless celestials? No bodiless celestials?" Gan Ruyen was shocked when she heard Chen Yiru's words. She found it hard to believe. How could there be no bodiless celestials in the 3 great sects? Moreover, the 3 great sects had existed for a long time. It was almost impossible for them to not have any bodiless celestials. The three great sects have existed for a long time. It's only natural that many people who failed the celestial ascension tribulation became bodiless celestials. Chen Yi-Ru patiently explained to Duanling Tian. However, once a bodiless celestial is born in the three great sects, they'll be targeted by the Dragon and Phoenix clans. The Dragon and Phoenix clans will immediately bring them back to their clans and force them to swear on the lightning penalty oath to serve the Dragon and Phoenix clans. During this process, the Dragons and Phoenixes would execute any bodiless celestials in the three great sects who disobeyed them. The Dragons and Phoenixes did this because they didn't want the three great sects to break free from their control after they gained many powerful bodiless celestials. They disdained to control those who were weaker than bodiless celestials, but they didn't want those stronger than bodiless celestials to break free from their control. For this reason, the three great sects have never had any bodiless celestials. To be more precise, they don't have any bodiless celestials. Duanling Tian was enlightened when he heard Chen Yi-Ru's words. I see. Apart from Duanling Tian, Ganru Yen was also enlightened. As it turns out, all the bodiless celestials in the history of Zoroastrianism were taken away by the Dragons and Phoenixes. Since there are no bodiless celestials in the sect, there's no need for him to worry about being in danger when he returns. Ganru Yen thought to herself as she looked at Duanling Tian. There are no bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism? Ganru Yen was not the only one who was worried about the presence of bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism who could threaten Duanling Tian. Even Kerr was worried about this. She sighed in relief when she heard Chen Yi-Ru said there were no bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism. Although the three great sects don't have any bodiless celestials, almost all bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land know about the relationship between the three great sects and the Dragons and Phoenixes. For this reason, no bodiless celestials would dare to annihilate any of the three great sects. Chen Yi-Ru said. Duanling Tian nodded. He had thought of this as well. His heart was heavy when he heard this. Based on Chen Yi-Ru's words, the three great sects were protected by the Dragons and Phoenixes. Moreover, the Dragons and Phoenixes had 8 tribulation bodiless celestials. If Duanling Tian wanted to annihilate the three great sects, he would have to face the threat of the Dragons and Phoenixes. This was like a bolt out of the blue to him. The Dragons and Phoenixes. At this moment, Duanling Tian finally realized how naive he was when he thought of annihilating the three great sects. Duanling Tian took a deep breath as an expression of unwillingness appeared on his face. Brother Tian, even Senior Feng Qingyang didn't manage to annihilate the three great sects. There's no need for you to feel unresigned. Kerr, who had been paying attention to Duanling Tian since the beginning, quickly comforted Duanling Tian. It was obvious she knew what Duanling Tian was thinking. All right. Duanling Tian nodded when he heard Kerr's words. Although the unwillingness on his face had lessened, his heart was still filled with unwillingness. Upon hearing Kerr's words, Ganru Yen was shocked. She immediately looked at Duanling Tian in shock and asked, You want to annihilate the three great sects, including the Zoroastrianism? The three great sects have killed countless members of the Seven Absolute Sect. As the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect, it's only natural that I want to annihilate them. Duanling Tian said as he looked at Ganru Yen indifferently. You? Ganru Yen was rendered speechless when she heard Duanling Tian's words. After all, if she were in Duanling Tian's shoes, she would have the same thoughts as well. Master, you want to annihilate the three great sects? Chen Yi-Ru was also shocked by Duanling Tian's words. Yes. Duanling Tian nodded. Master, I'm afraid it's impossible for you to annihilate the three great sects. Chen Yi-Ru smiled wryly as he said, Even Senior Feng Qingyang failed to annihilate the three great sects after killing the dragons, and 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. The Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan, which protect the three great sects, are extremely powerful and have a background that is beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Senior Feng Qingyang killed the dragons, and 8 tribulation bodiless celestial? As soon as Chen Yi-Ru finished speaking, Duanling Tian turned to look at Chen Yi-Ru with an expression of shock and disbelief. Duanling Tian was an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. How could Senior Feng Qingyang be able to kill him? How's this possible? Ganru Yen looked at Chen Yi-Ru in disbelief. As far as I know, Senior Feng Qingyang from the Seven Absolutes sect wasn't a bodiless celestial. He was an eminent celestial who had successfully passed the celestial ascension tribulation. How could an eminent celestial kill an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial? Madam. Chen Yi-Ru looked at Ganru Yen respectfully and lowered his head as he replied, Ordinary people in the Dao Martial Saint Land might not have heard of this. Chapter 2355. Usually, if Chen Yiru had misunderstood that Gan Ruyan was Duan Lingtian's woman and addressed Gan Ruyan as his wife, Duan Lingtian would have corrected him. However, since Chen Yiru's words were too shocking and involved Feng Qingyang, Duan Lingtian did not have the time to argue with him. Not only did Duan Lingtian not care about Chen Yiru's words, but he even stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at Chen Yiru intently. Duan Lingtian, Duan Siling and Gan Ruyan came to a halt as well. Chen Yiru, who was leading his two servants, also came to a halt. At this moment, Duan Lingtian and Gan Ruyan were not the only ones who were staring at Chen Yiru. Even and Duan Siling were looking at Chen Yiru. It was obvious they wanted to know what happened next as well. Faced with Duan Lingtian and the others' gazes, Chen Yiru did not dare to keep them in suspense. He quickly said, "At that time, when Senior Feng Qingyang wanted to annihilate the three great sects, the dragons and phoenixes sent 5 7 bodiless celestials and 2 8 bodiless celestials to stop Senior Feng Qingyang. During that battle, Senior Feng Qingyang fought against 7 people and killed 2 7 bodiless celestials from the phoenixes, 1 7 bodiless celestial, and 1 8 bodiless celestial from the dragons. After that, Senior Feng Qingyang was severely injured. After that battle, Senior Feng Qingyang managed to escape unscathed. All the bodiless celestials thought that as long as Senior Feng Qingyang recovered, he would be able to ignore the threat from the dragons and phoenixes and annihilate the 3 great sects. The 8 bodiless celestial from the Phoenix clan has successfully passed the 9th bodiless celestial tribulation and become a 9 bodiless celestial. At this point, Chen Yiru's tone became serious. 9th tribulation scattered immortal. When Chen Yiru mentioned 9 bodiless celestials, Duan Lingtian's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. 9 bodiless celestials were existences who stood at the peak of the mundane realms. Throughout the long history of the devil clans, the number of 9 bodiless celestials was pitifully few. Duan Lingtian did not know about the 9 bodiless celestials in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, based on the rarity of 9 bodiless celestials in the devil clans, it was not difficult for him to guess that the number of 9 bodiless celestials in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land must be extremely rare as well. But now he heard Chen Yiru's words. During Senior Feng Qingyang's era, there was a 9 bodiless celestial in the Phoenix clan. Does this mean Senior Feng Qingyang didn't manage to annihilate the 3 great sects because there was a 9 bodiless celestial in the Phoenix clan? Duan Lingtian asked as he looked at Chen Yiru. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's heart was in turmoil. Senior Feng Qingyang was able to kill 8 bodiless celestials after becoming an eminent celestial before he ascended? What kind of terrifying strength was that? Even if I have the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, and even if I completely comprehend all 5 stages of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword, my combat strength is only comparable to a 7 bodiless celestial. At that time, my strength was almost at its peak before I ascended. At that time, it was difficult for me to kill a 7 bodiless celestial, let alone an 8 bodiless celestial who was stronger than a 7 bodiless celestial. For this reason, Duan Lingtian was shocked when he learned that Feng Qingyang had killed an 8 bodiless celestial when he was only an eminent celestial. He could not figure out how Feng Qingyang had done it. That's one of the reasons. Chen Yiru nodded. Moreover, if Senior Feng Qingyang wanted to leave, even the 9 bodiless celestial from the Phoenix clan wouldn't be able to stop him. For this reason, Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and the phoenixes came to an agreement. Senior Feng Qingyang wouldn't attack the 3 great sections. The dragons and the phoenixes also promised that they wouldn't interfere in the enmity between the 7 Absolute sect and the 3 great sects as long as the 7 Absolute sect doesn't affect the 3 great sections. Duan Lingtian nodded. If that was the case, it would explain why Senior Feng Qingyang did not destroy the 3 great sections. Master. At this moment, Chen Yiru seemed to have recalled something. He looked at Duan Lingtian and reminded him. Due to the agreement between the dragons, the phoenixes and Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and the phoenixes won't attack the 7 Absolute sect. However, if someone like Senior Feng Qingyang who can suppress the 3 great sects appears in the 7 Absolute sect, I'm sure they'll interfere without damaging the 7 Absolute sect's foundation. For example, with your current strength, you're strong enough to defeat the 3 great sections. However, if you make a move and intend to shake the foundation of the 3 great sects, the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan will definitely not stand by idly. Chen Yiru's expression turned solemn when he reached the end of his sentence. He did not want his master to offend the dragons and the phoenixes. After all, even if his master had strength comparable to a sixth tribulation bodiless celestial, he might not be able to survive if he offended the dragons and the phoenixes. After all, the dragons and the phoenixes had only promised not to interfere as long as the seven absolute sect did not affect the three great sects' foundation. However, if Duan Lingtian wanted to destroy the three great sects' foundation, they would not agree to it. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded. His expression was grave as he felt powerless. Previously, when he left the city, he was in high spirits. He thought he could easily kill Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to avenge Hua Lao. After that, he would destroy the Zoroastrianism sect. After destroying Zoroastrianism, he would destroy the Zhuangzi Buddhism and the Heaven Divination sect. He wanted to avenge the deaths of the seven absolute sects members and fulfill his responsibility as the sect leader of the seven absolute sect. However, he did not expect the three great sects to have such a strong background. With the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan around, even if I can destroy the three great sects before they realize what's going on with their strength, it's entirely possible for them to rebuild the three great sections. Moreover, they might even attack the other members of the seven absolute sect out of anger over what I've done. At this moment, Duan Lingtian thought of many things before he finally came to a conclusion. It would be easy to destroy the three great sects, but it would be difficult to deal with the dragons and the phoenixes. Unless I'm strong enough to suppress all the bodiless celestials and the dragons and the phoenixes, it's impossible for me to destroy the three great sections. Although Duan Lingtian was unwilling to accept this fact, he had no choice but to accept it. Even if I can't destroy the three great sects, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, must die. After a long while, Duan Lingtian finally regained his senses. His eyes were filled with hatred that seemed capable of incinerating everything. At this moment, Duan Lingtian vented all his frustrations on Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Due to his fear of the dragons and the phoenixes, he could not destroy Zoroastrianism. On the other hand, killing the sect leader of Zoroastrianism would not shake the foundation of Zoroastrianism. According to the agreement between the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan, they were not allowed to interfere in the feud between the seven absolute sect and the three great sects as long as the three great sects were not shaken. Let's continue on our journey. Duan Lingtian said angrily as he led the three women to continue on their journey. As for Qin Yiru, he quickly followed after Duan Lingtian with his two servants. Sword Saint Feng Qingyang was only an eminent celestial back then, but he was able to kill 8 tribulation bodiless celestials? Based on what Qin Yiru said, Feng Qingyang was even able to escape unscathed from a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Gan Ru Yen finally regained her senses after being led by Duan Lingtian. She could not help but feel shocked. Duan Lingtian and the others traveled at a very fast speed. It did not take long before they arrived at the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land and arrived at the Zoroastrianism's estate. Zoroastrianism. I Duan Lingtian am back. Duan Lingtian's eyes shone brightly as he looked at the Zoroastrianism's estate in front of him. His eyes shone brightly like the stars in the night sky, illuminating the darkness of the night. Swoosh. Duan Lingtian led Kerr and the other 2 women into the Zoroastrianism's estate in just a flash. They flew past the Zoroastrianism's 4 symbol sanctums and arrived in the sky above the saint land of Zoroastrianism. Swoosh. Qin Yiru and his 2 servants followed after Duan Lingtian and the others. Gan Ru Yen looked down at the saint land of Zoroastrianism with a nostalgic expression on her face. Tang Xian, show yourself. Duan Lingtian shouted coldly. Like a clap of thunder, his voice swept through the Zoroastrianism saint land, Zoroastrianism's 4 symbol sanctums, and finally the entire Zoroastrianism's estate. As soon as Duan Lingtian shouted, Duan Lingtian and the others disappeared. With just a flash, Duan Lingtian brought the 3 women through the clouds above the Zoroastrianism Saint Land and arrived at the floating islands above the Saint Island in the Zoroastrianism Saint Land. Duan Lingtian directly went to the floating island that was situated at the highest point. It was like an emperor that was surrounded by stars. He stared at the floating island coldly. This floating island was the cultivation place of Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. After so many years, Duan Lingtian did not feel nostalgic when he came here again. In his heart, there was only boundless sorrow. This was because Hua Lao had sacrificed his life to pave a way for him and the 3 women by his side. He sent them to the Debussy subterranean so they could escape Tang Xian's clutches. Tang Xian, show yourself. Tang Xian, show yourself. Chapter 2356. Tang Xian. Show yourself. The thunderous voice reverberated in the Zoroastrianism's estate, causing a commotion in the Zoroastrianism sect. It shocked all the Zoroastrianism members. Who was Tang Xian? He was the supreme sect leader of Zoroastrianism. His cultivation base was at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, and he was ranked 4th on the Supreme Saint ranking. However, someone had actually barged into the Zoroastrianism's estate and asked their sect leader to show himself. How arrogant was that? Is this person tired of living? He actually dares to provoke Lord Sect Leader. Soon after, many Zoroastrianism disciples in the Zoroastrianism sect leader's estate began to make similar remarks. With Lord Sect Leader's current strength, apart from Ye Tian who's ranked 1st on the Supreme Saint ranking, even the Great Priest of Heaven Divination sect and the Supreme Elder of Zhuangzi Buddhism wouldn't dare to act so arrogantly in front of our Zoroastrianism, right? Many people found it hard to believe. That person. Is he seeking death? Many people felt the owner of the voice was seeking death. Just when most people were shocked by the arrogant words, a different voice spread out. That's right. That's right. That's right. Don't you think that voice is a little familiar? Similar words were circulating in the Black Turtle Sanctum, one of the 4 symbols sanctums of Zoroastrianism, and the Saint Island in the Saint Land of Zoroastrianism. Many people felt that the arrogant voice sounded too arrogant. That arrogant voice sounded very familiar. It was as if he had heard it somewhere before. I remember now. At this moment, someone finally regained his senses. This voice. It's exactly the same as Guardian Ling Tian's voice. Guardian Ling Tian? Now that you mention it, it's true. More and more people regain their senses. It can't be Guardian Ling Tian, can it? Put aside the fact that it's impossible for him to do that, even if he had a falling out with Lord Sect Leader, I don't think he would dare to act so arrogantly in front of Lord Sect Leader, right? I don't think it's Ling Tian either. It should be someone who sounds like Guardian Ling Tian. In this world, people who look alike can be found everywhere. Not to mention people who sound alike. Many people in the Zoroastrianism's estate thought the arrogant voice sounded like Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. However, they were in agreement. The arrogant voice belonged to someone whose voice was similar to Guardian Ling Tian's voice. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Almost as soon as Duan Ling Tian finished speaking, a few figures shot out from the floating islands below the floating island that looked like a moon surrounded by a myriad of stars. Master. Gan Ru Yen, who was standing behind Duan Ling Tian, could not help but greet one of the figures excitedly. Gan Ru Yan's master was none other than Qing Hua, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. When the green-clad old man heard the voice of his direct disciple, Gan Ru Yan, the moment he appeared, he was so excited that his old face began to tremble. However, despite his excitement, he still maintained a stern expression on his face as he sent a voice transmission to Gan Ru Yan. It's one thing for both of you to leave, but why did you come back? Don't you know it's dangerous to come back? A hint of worry could be heard in Qing Hua's voice when he reached the end of his sentence. Qing Hua, the guardian of the Zoroastrianism, had long regarded Gan Ru Yan as his daughter. Therefore, when he saw that Gan Ru Yan had returned, he was both happy and worried about Gan Ru Yan's current dangerous situation. Previously, the sect leader of the Zoroastrianism had forced the guardian Duan Ling Tian to leave because of the saintess. He and the other 3 protectors felt that they shouldn't have done that. They all agreed. With Duan Ling Tian's importance to Zoroastrianism, the Zoroastrianism's rules could have given him the green light for the saintess. However, he could clearly feel the stubbornness of the leader of Zoroastrianism. The sect leader of Zoroastrianism viewed the saintess as the reincarnation of a goddess. It was obvious he would not show mercy just because of how important Duan Ling Tian was to Zoroastrianism. Otherwise, he would not have forced Duan Ling Tian and the others to leave. For this reason, Qing Hua could not help but feel anxious when he saw his direct disciple, Gan Ru Yan, had returned with Duan Ling Tian. Master, don't worry. With him around, I won't be in any danger. Gan Ru Yan shook her head when she heard her master's voice transmission. She did not seem to be in a hurry at all. Instead, she sounded as though she was trying to console her master. She was trying to persuade Qing Hua not to worry. Guardian Ling Tian? At the same time, the other 3 Zoroastrianism guardians who came with Qing Hua, Zifeng, Hong Yun, and Leng Ying, turned to look at Duan Ling Tian. Based on their expressions, it was obvious they were displeased. Guardian Ling Tian, even if your strength is extraordinary and you're second only to Lord Sect Leader in Zoroastrianism, you don't have the right to be so presumptuous in front of Lord Sect Leader, right? Not only did you call Lord Sect Leader by name, but you even asked Lord Sect Leader to come out. Even if you're a guardian of Zoroastrianism and can ignore most of the rules of Zoroastrianism, you shouldn't be so arrogant, right? Guardian Ling Tian, you're finally back. In the end, Qinghua was the one who spoke and broke the silence. Yes. Duan Ling Tian nodded nonchalantly. He had a good impression of Qinghua, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Moreover, Qinghua was the master of his wife's sister. Since Qinghua had taken the initiative to greet him, naturally he could not ignore him. Even with his current strength, he could easily kill an existence like Qinghua with a wave of his hand. Guardian Ling Tian. At this moment, Leng Ying, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, stepped forward and glared at Duan Ling Tian angrily. Even if you're a guardian of Zoroastrianism and can ignore most of the rules of Zoroastrianism, even a guardian of Zoroastrianism will be punished for disrespecting Lord Sect Leader. Leng Ying was the former Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall. Although he was no longer the Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall, he still could not stand Duan Ling Tian acting so presumptuously in front of Lord Sect Leader of Zoroastrianism. Although Zifeng and Hong Yun did not say anything, it was not difficult to figure out their stance based on the displeasure on their faces. A guardian of Zoroastrianism? Duan Ling Tian could not help but smile when he heard Leng Ying's words. The guardians of Zoroastrianism did not understand why Duan Ling Tian suddenly smiled. Duan Ling Tian's eyes narrowed. In the next moment. Today I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. When Duan Ling Tian spoke again, his voice rang out like a bell. It resounded throughout the Zoroastrianism and reached the ears of everyone in the Zoroastrianism base. Everyone in the Zoroastrianism base was shocked. Today I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Today I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. At the same time, the echoes continued to echo throughout the Zoroastrianism base. It was as if the speaker was reminding everyone in the Zoroastrianism base. The person who spoke earlier and the person who spoke now was the same person. It was the guardian of Zoroastrianism, Duan Ling Tian. That's really Guardian Ling Tian's voice? In the Zoroastrianism base, the elders and disciples were all stunned. The owner of the voice earlier was really Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Can anyone tell me, what's going on? What's going on? Why did Guardian Ling Tian ask the leader to come out in an unfriendly tone? Then he announced that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. I haven't heard any news about Guardian Ling Tian for a few years. Now that he's here, the entire Zoroastrianism base is alarmed. He's really amazing. Now, the people in the Zoroastrianism base couldn't figure out why Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, would suddenly do this. However, there was one thing they were certain of. There must be a reason behind all of this. Moreover, it was highly likely that the leader of Zoroastrianism had done something to upset this guardian. Otherwise, why would he be so arrogant and bold as to ask the leader of Zoroastrianism to come out and announce that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism? What's going on with him? What's going on? In the Zoroastrianism base, Lu Yun, Lu Mu, and the others who were close to Duan Ling Tian were stunned when they heard Duan Ling Tian's thunderous words. They had no idea what was going on at all. No matter what's going on, I'm afraid he's offending the leader by making such a ruckus in front of him and announcing that he's leaving Zoroastrianism. While Lu Yun, Lu Mu, and the others were stunned, they couldn't help but worry about Duan Ling Tian's current situation. At this moment, those who were close to Duan Ling Tian were naturally worried about Duan Ling Tian. On the other hand, those who did not have a good relationship with Duan Ling Tian were overjoyed when they heard Duan Ling Tian's words that spread to the entire fire worship sect's estate. This Duan Ling Tian actually announced that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism? If he's a guardian of Zoroastrianism and dares to act presumptuously in front of the leader, perhaps the leader would show him mercy. As for now, I'm afraid Duan Ling Tian is in trouble. Chapter 2357. Today I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially renounced Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Duan Ling Tian's words reverberated in the ears of the guardians of Zoroastrianism. It took them a long time to regain their senses. This was especially true for Guardian Leng Ying. He did not expect Duan Ling Tian to say something like this. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian had directly announced that he was renouncing Zoroastrianism. He was no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Leng Ying was stunned. He could not help but feel a wave of helplessness. Is this necessary? All I did was casually say that I was going to punish you. Is there a need for you to announce that you're renouncing Zoroastrianism? Aren't you being a scoundrel? Scoundrel. How shameless. Leng Ying thought to himself. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He thought Duan Lingtian had only announced his renunciation of Zoroastrianism after listening to his words. He thought Duan Lingtian would no longer be a guardian of Zoroastrianism. However, he did not know that Duan Lingtian's words were true. Even without Leng Ying's words, Duan Lingtian would still have announced his renunciation of Zoroastrianism. This was because he knew his other identity. He was no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Currently, he was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. He was the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. Since the Seven Absolute sect and the other three great sects, including Zoroastrianism, were sworn enemies, as the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, it was only natural that Duan Lingtian would no longer be a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Otherwise, if the souls of the ancestors of the Seven Absolute sect who had passed away found out about this, they would be furious. The current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect was also a guardian of Zoroastrianism. They would most likely be so angry that they would vomit blood. Guardian Lingtian, you shouldn't joke around like this. Zifeng quickly regained his senses. He looked at Duan Lingtian and said sternly. After Protector Hong Yun and Protector Qing Huo regained their senses, they nodded in agreement with Protector Zifeng's words. As for Leng Ying, he thought he was the one who had forced Duan Lingtian to renounce Zoroastrianism. Therefore he did not say anything even though he was furious. He did not want Duan Lingtian to leave Zoroastrianism. Leng Zoroastrianism Leng Ying Leng Lingtian. Joke. Duan Lingtian shook his head when he heard Zifeng's words. Guardian Zifeng, I'm not joking. I Duan Lingtian have come back today for two things. Firstly, to renounce Zoroastrianism. Secondly, to kill. Before Duan Lingtian could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by a voice that suddenly rang in the air. So, Guardian Lingtian, are you determined to renounce Zoroastrianism? As soon as the voice rang in the air, a figure appeared in front of the four great guardians of the fire worship sect. It was as though he had appeared out of thin air. He was a tall and burly middle-aged man. He wore a long white robe with a red flame embroidered on it. It was similar to the uniform of the elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism. Of course, it was only similar because the flame embroidered on his white robe was unique. If one took a closer look, they would see that the robe was covered in flames. The flame embroidered on the middle-aged man's robe seemed to form a long divine dragon that circled around his body. It was as if the true dragon was protecting his body. Although the middle-aged man was tall and burly, his appearance was very proper. He did not look boorish at all. Regardless of whether it was her figure or her face, every part of her was just right, almost perfect. There was a majestic aura between his brows. It was as though he could make all living things submit to him. Tang Xian. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he saw the middle-aged man. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. A raging fire burned in the depths of his heart. It was as though it could burn everything to ashes. Sect leader. As soon as the middle-aged man appeared, the four Zoroastrianism protectors, Zifeng, Qinghua, Hong Yun, and Leng Ying hurriedly bowed to him respectfully. The middle-aged man was none other than the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, Tang Xian. Saint. As soon as Tang Xian appeared, he looked at Kerr who was standing next to Duan Lingtian. His eyes lit up immediately. It was as though to him, the return of this woman was the most important thing to him. In fact, this was indeed the case. Then Tang Xian turned to Duan Lingtian and said calmly, Protector Lingtian, I didn't expect that the first thing you did after returning to Zoroastrianism after not seeing you for a few years is to call me by my name and ask me to show myself. Tang Xian's voice turned slightly gloomy when he reached the end of his sentence. In his eyes, Duan Lingtian was only a protector. Duan Lingtian was only a small protector of Zoroastrianism. Even if Duan Lingtian was strong, he did not have the right to yell at him. Moreover, Duan Lingtian had called him by his name and asked him to show himself in front of all the members of Zoroastrianism. Duan Lingtian was trampling on Tang Xian's dignity as the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Naturally, even though Tang Xian was furious and filled with killing intent, He knew he could not kill Duan Lingtian now. Duan Lingtian had blasphemed the saint of Zoroastrianism. This meant he had offended the godlike man. He had to imprison Duan Lingtian and wait for the godlike man to descend upon the mundane realm. At that time he would hand Duan Lingtian over to the godlike man and let the godlike man decide whether Duan Lingtian lived or died. This was the only way to appease the godlike man. If Tang Xian killed Duan Lingtian, the godlike man would vent his anger on Tang Xian. So what? Duan Lingtian replied calmly when he heard Tang Xian's words. Based on his words, it was obvious he was not afraid of Tang Xian at all. A few years ago Tang Xian was no match for Tang Xian. He could only look up to Tang Xian and was powerless in front of him. Today, a few years later, Tang Xian was like an ant in his eyes that couldn't even withstand a single blow. Ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage? So what? Tang Xian had killed a three-tribulation bodiless celestial who was stronger than an eminent celestial. A mere cultivator at the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage who was not even an eminent celestial was nothing to him. So what? Duan Lingtian's casual reply not only shocked Tang Xian, but even the four guardians of Zoroastrianism were dumbfounded. Previously, they had thought Duan Lingtian was only acting so presumptuously because the sect leader of Zoroastrianism was not present. They did not expect Duan Lingtian would still be so arrogant even when the sect leader of Zoroastrianism was present. It was obvious Duan Lingtian did not take the sect leader of Zoroastrianism seriously at all. Could it be that he's serious? Does he really intend to leave Zoroastrianism? The four guardians could not help but think to themselves. Good. Very good. Duan Lingtian's casual reply infuriated Tang Xian. Tang Xian's expression darkened immediately. Guardian Lingtian seems to be getting bolder and bolder after not seeing him for a few years. However, I still want to confirm something. Guardian Lingtian, do you really intend to leave Zoroastrianism and stop being a guardian of Zoroastrianism? Tang Xian's gaze on Duan Lingtian grew sharper as he spoke. It was as though his gaze had turned into a sword. It was as though he would kill Duan Lingtian if he dared to say no. As soon as Tang Xian finished speaking, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism stared at Duan Lingtian intently. They wanted to know how Duan Lingtian would respond to their sect leader of Zoroastrianism. I don't like to repeat what I've said before. Duan Lingtian replied to Tang Xian's question calmly. He did not beat around the bush and was straightforward. Duan Lingtian's reply sent chills down the spines of the four guardians of Zoroastrianism. Is Duan Lingtian crazy? Where does he get the courage to do this? Isn't he afraid that our sect leader will kill him in a fit of rage? If he's a guardian of the fire worship sect, we might still be able to resolve the matter of him blaspheming the saint girl. However, if he's not a guardian of the fire worship sect, putting aside the fact that he's disrespectful to Lord sect leader, just the blasphemy against the saint girl is enough to make him suffer. An outsider blaspheming the saint of Zoroastrianism is a crime punishable by death. At this moment, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism thought that Duan Lingtian had gone mad. Otherwise, how could he be so arrogant in front of their sect leader of Zoroastrianism? Of course, it was not as though they had not considered the possibility that Duan Lingtian might have the courage to do so. However, as soon as they thought of it, they dismissed it. This was because they felt that it was impossible and unrealistic. It should be noted that it had only been a few years since Duan Lingtian left Zoroastrianism. It was unrealistic for Duan Lingtian to have the strength to be fearless against their sect leader of Zoroastrianism in just a few years. Good. Very good. Tang Xian repeated the word good a few more times. His tone was getting lower and lower. It was obvious how angry he was right now. Tang Xian's gaze was as cold as a knife as he spoke. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. Tang Xian's words were like a clap of thunder that spread throughout the Zoroastrianism's base. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as Tang Xian finished speaking, the expressions of the four guardians of Zoroastrianism changed drastically. They knew very well what was going on. Chapter 2358. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. Tang Xian's words that contained a vast amount of saint origin reverberated in the Zoroastrianism estate. During this process, the entire Zoroastrianism estate was in an uproar. This is Lord Sect Leader's voice? Lord Sect Leader said that Guardian Ling Tian has blasphemed the saint girl? What's going on? Upon hearing Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, saying that Duan Ling Tian had blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism, the people in the Zoroastrianism estate were stunned. After a long while, someone finally regained his senses. At this moment, the Zoroastrianism estate became even more lively. The saint girl that Lord Sect Leader mentioned must be the saint girl of Zoroastrianism who has been missing for many years, right? That must be it. Apart from that saint girl, there's no other saint girl of Zoroastrianism. Moreover, that saint girl was blasphemed and gave birth to a daughter. Didn't they say that the man who blasphemed the saint girl is from the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Don't forget that Guardian Ling Tian is from the lower province. Previously, he was the young mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion, one of the two most powerful forces in the lower province. That's right. It's no secret in the upper province that Guardian Ling Tian is from the lower province. The group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples were shocked when they learned that the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism was Duan Ling Tian. Although they had heard that the saint girl of Zoroastrianism had been blasphemed by a man from the lower province, they did not expect it to be the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. They did not expect that the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism would be Guardian Ling Tian. In that case, the saint girl's daughter is Guardian Ling Tian's child? I really didn't expect that man to be Guardian Ling Tian. Guardian Elder, Guardian Sect Leader of Zoroastrianism, Guardian Sect Leader, Guardian Elder Ling Tian, didn't he? Z Sect Stein, Xian Stein, Ling Sect Leader, he Ling Tian Sect Leader. Ling Sect. That's possible. After all, he Ling Tian Sect Leader's decision to expel him from Zoroastrianism and Lord Sect Leader's decision to expel him from Zoroastrianism are two completely different concepts. That's right. If it's the former, people will think he's leaving Zoroastrianism. However, if it's the latter, it won't sound good to others. At this moment, many people began to speculate. The reason Duan Ling Tian had announced his decision to leave Zoroastrianism was because of the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. Lord Sect Leader is going to expel Guardian Ling Tian from Zoroastrianism because of this. I don't think there's a need for that, right? As far as I know, Guardians have always enjoyed special privileges in Zoroastrianism. They can ignore some of the rules, right? Why can't they do it this time? The saint girl of Zoroastrianism wandered to the lower province when she was still young and became acquainted with Guardian Ling Tian. We can't blame her. Since she's acquainted with Guardian Ling Tian, what's wrong with granting them their wish? If we grant them their wish, it might become a beautiful story in the history of Zoroastrianism. Compared to losing a powerhouse like Guardian Ling Tian, the saint girl's mistake is nothing to Zoroastrianism. More than 90% of the people in the Zoroastrianism base did not want their sect leader to expel Guardian Ling Tian because of this. Instead, they advocated for Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl of Zoroastrianism to be together. I think we should plead on behalf of Guardian Ling Tian. I think so too. Guardian Ling Tian is too important to Zoroastrianism. If we lose Guardian Ling Tian, Zoroastrianism is no different from losing an arm. In order to keep Guardian Ling Tian, we should marry our saint girl to him. Let's go. Let's plead on behalf of Guardian Ling Tian. In the Holy Land of Zoroastrianism, a group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples rose into the air and flew toward the Holy Island. In the four symbols sanctums of Zoroastrianism, apart from the sanctum leader of the Azure Dragon Sanctum, the sanctum leaders of the other three sanctums and their elders had also left the four symbols sanctums and entered the Holy Land. Even the disciples of the four symbols sanctums wished they could grow a pair of wings and fly into the Holy Land of Zoroastrianism to plead on behalf of their Guardian Ling Tian. In the sky above the Holy Island of Zoroastrianism, a group of people flew through the clouds and arrived near Duan Ling Tian and Tang Xian's group. These people were led by the two vice-sect leaders of Zoroastrianism. Below them were a group of Golden Flame Elders, Silver Flame Elders and Bronze Flame Elders from Zoroastrianism, as well as a group of Holy Land disciples. In just a blink of an eye, the area was filled with people. Why are all of you here? Guardian Lung Ying of Zoroastrianism could not help but frown when he saw the group of people who had gathered around them in just a blink of an eye. However, no one paid any attention to him. Everyone's eyes were trained on Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. It was as though Tang Xian had a special charm that attracted them. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. In the end, the two vice-sect leaders of Zoroastrianism took the lead and bowed to Tang Xian. Based on their words, they wanted Tang Xian to retract his words about spreading Zoroastrianism in the holy land of Zoroastrianism. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. Some of the people who were slow to react and those who had just arrived began to plead with Tang Xian to retract his words. They hoped Tang Xian would not expel Duan Lingtian from Zoroastrianism. Do all of you know what you're doing? Tang Xian looked at the group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples around him with a gloomy expression on his face. Tang Xian did not expect the elders and disciples of the fire worship sect would come and ask him to rescind his order just because he had mentioned Duan Lingtian's crimes and expelled him from the fire worship sect. In other words, he had to take back what he had said earlier. Lord Sect Leader. At this moment, one of the two vice-sect leaders of Zoroastrianism spoke up. Although Guardian Ling Tian has violated the rules of the sect, it's understandable. Moreover, he has helped us defeat the powerhouses invited by Zhuangzi Buddhism. He's made up for his crimes. That's right, Lord Sect Leader. The other sect leader of Zoroastrianism chimed in. With Guardian Ling Tian's current strength, if he stays in Zoroastrianism, we'll be like a tiger that has grown wings. It's not worth it to give up such a powerhouse for a small rule. If the marriage between Guardian Ling Tian and the Saint Girl is passed down to the future generations, it'll definitely be a good story. Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the Saint Girl's wish. A golden flame elder of Zoroastrianism spoke loudly. Instantly. Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the Saint Girl's wish. Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the Saint Girl's wish. A group of elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism began to plead with Tang Xian. They hoped that Tang Xian would not be bothered by such trifles and grant Guardian Ling Tian and the Saint Girl's wish. If the four guardians of Zoroastrianism had only just arrived, they would have followed suit and pleaded with the sect leader of Zoroastrianism as well. Since they had arrived a long time ago, they could vaguely sense something was amiss. The reason Duan Lingtian announced his decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with the Saint Girl. Duan Lingtian, who was confronting Tang Xian, did not expect such a thing to happen. A group of elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism came to plead on his behalf. Moreover, based on their whispers, they thought Duan Lingtian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had something to do with Kerr. Duan Lingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Duan Lingtian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with Kerr. Although Duan Lingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry, he could not help but feel touched. He knew the Zoroastrianism group was pleading on his behalf because he was second only to the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, Tang Xian. The Zoroastrianism group was still unaware that Duan Lingtian's strength was far superior to Tang Xian's. Everyone. Duan Lingtian could not ignore the appearance of the Zoroastrianism group and pleading on his behalf. The reason I announced my decision to leave Zoroastrianism has nothing to do with my wife Kerr, the former Saint Girl of Zoroastrianism. What? Guardian Ling Tian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with the Saint Girl? What's going on? If it's not because of his relationship with the Saint Girl, what else could it be? As soon as Duan Ling Tian spoke, the group of people who were pleading on his behalf was stunned. They had no idea what was going on. For a moment, the group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples turned to look at Duan Ling Tian. Guardian Ling Tian. If it's not because of your relationship with the Saint Girl, why are you leaving Zoroastrianism? Is there something about Zoroastrianism that you're unhappy with? One of the vice-sect leaders of Zoroastrianism immediately asked Duan Ling Tian. That's right. Guardian Ling Tian, you must have a reason for leaving Zoroastrianism, right? Another vice-sect leader of Zoroastrianism chimed in. Of course, there's a reason. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Then, under the watchful eyes of the group of people, he said unhurriedly, the reason is, due to my identity, it's impossible for me to continue staying in Zoroastrianism. Identity? What identity? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the group of people from Zoroastrianism looked at Duan Lingtian in confusion. At this moment, even Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, and the four guardians of Zoroastrianism, looked at Duan Lingtian in confusion. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duan Lingtian spoke in a clear voice. Chapter 2359. I, Duan Lingtian, am the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny of the Seven Absolute sect. Duan Lingtian announced under everyone's watchful eyes. Although his voice was not loud, it was deafening to the ears of the people from Zoroastrianism. The people from Zoroastrianism, including sect leader Tang Xian, were shocked when they heard Duan Lingtian's words. It was as though they had just heard something unbelievable. The reason for this was because Duan Lingtian's words were too shocking. The Fog Rain progeny of the Seven Absolute sect? Was that not the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? However, Ling Tian from Zoroastrianism had just said that he was the successor of the Seven Absolute sect. He was the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? Is this a joke? Oh, how's this possible? Guardian Ling Tian. How could he be from the Seven Absolute sect? As far as I know, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, is also the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. If Guardian Ling Tian is the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, doesn't that mean he's also the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect? The people from Zoroastrianism, from the vice sect leaders and elders to the ordinary disciples of Zoroastrianism, were in disbelief when they heard Duan Lingtian's words. Because this was too outrageous, too exaggerated. The Seven Absolute sect? The Seven Absolute sect was the sworn enemy of the three great sects, including Zoroastrianism. It was the sect that they had spent so much effort to destroy. If Guardian Ling Tian is really the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, wouldn't he be seeking death by exposing his identity to Zoroastrianism? I think so too. Guardian Ling Tian must have said that on purpose. He can't be from the Seven Absolute sect, let alone the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. In the eyes of most of the Zoroastrianism elders and disciples, if Duan Lingtian was really from the Seven Invincible sect, then he would be courting death by revealing his identity in public. Therefore they were almost certain that Duan Lingtian had said that on purpose. As for the reason he said that on purpose in their opinion, it was because he was dissatisfied with their Zoroastrianism sect leader's unwillingness to let him marry the saintess, Guardian Ling Tian. At this moment, Gan Ruyan's master, Guardian Qinghua, looked at Duan Lingtian and reminded him with a solemn expression, some jokes shouldn't be made carelessly. If someone takes it seriously, it'll be too late even if you say it's a joke. As soon as Qinghua finished speaking, the other three Zoroastrianism guardians, including Icy Eagle, nodded in agreement. A joke. Upon hearing Qinghua's words and hearing the discussions in the surroundings, Duan Lingtian was stunned. He was rendered speechless. What the hell was going on? Why did these people think he was joking? Was there a need for him to make such a joke? Duan Lingtian shook his head lightly. However, he did not bother to explain himself since there was no need for him to do so. Of course he couldn't be bothered to explain. He disdained to explain. Tang Xian. Duan Lingtian looked at Tang Xian, the sect leader of Fire Worship sect. His eyes were as sharp as a blade as he said in a low voice that was filled with killing intent. Today I've come to Zoroastrianism for two reasons. Firstly, I want to leave Zoroastrianism. Secondly, I want to kill you. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, his robe began to swell as a vast and majestic aura swept out from his body. It was as though it could suppress everything. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, an uproar broke out among the crowd. Not only does Guardian Ling Tian intend to leave Zoroastrianism, but he also intends to kill Lord Sect Leader? Is he really Ling Tian? Based on his tone he seems very confident. I wonder where he gets his confidence from? It has only been a few years. Don't tell me he's capable of overturning the heavens with his current strength? The people from Zoroastrianism looked at Duan Lingtian as though they had seen a ghost. Although they knew Duan Lingtian was strong a few years ago, they were certain he would become even stronger after a few years. However, they did not believe Duan Lingtian would be able to defeat Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, was a powerhouse at the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage. Moreover, he was ranked fourth on the Supreme Saint ranking. How could an ordinary person be a match for such a powerhouse? Kill me? Tang Xian was shocked when Duan Lingtian said he was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. However, when he heard Duan Lingtian wanted to kill him, he was so angry that he started laughing. A disdainful expression could be seen on Tang Xian's face. A hint of disdain could be seen in the depths of Tang Xian's eyes. Tang Xian knew his current strength very well. He had only broken through to the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage a few years ago. However, due to the godlike powerhouse from the Devata realm who had given him some benefits in the past, his comprehension of heaven and earth had reached its peak. In other words, if his cultivation base improved, he would be able to attract the celestial ascension tribulation. With his current cultivation base, he was 90% confident he could defeat Lang Qianjin, the supreme elder of Zhuangzi Buddhism, and Mo Xian, the grand priest of heaven divination sect. Both of them were ranked 2nd and 3rd on the supreme saint ranking. With my movement divine ability, I don't think anyone can kill me unless there are 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. Tang Xian was very confident about this. For this reason, he felt as though he had heard a joke when he heard Duan Ling Tian wanted to kill him. What? You don't believe me? Duan Ling Tian narrowed his eyes when he saw the disdain on Tang Xian's face. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes as though he was about to devour Tang Xian. How dare you be so rude to my master? You're seeking death. At this moment, Qin Yi Ru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, who was originally as docile as a cat, said in a low voice as his eyes flashed coldly. The moment he let out this cold shout, his entire body seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Whoosh. When Qin Yi Ru reappeared, he was standing in front of Tang Xian. Tang Xian's expression changed drastically. He did not even see how Qin Yi Ru had appeared in front of him. No matter how strong an eminent celestial is, it's impossible for him to appear in front of me so stealthily, a thought appeared in Tang Xian's mind. Is he a bodiless celestial? In his opinion, only a 3 tribulation bodiless celestial or higher would be able to appear in front of him so stealthily. However, if he's a bodiless celestial, why did he address Duan Ling Tian as master? Tang Xian was confused when he thought about how Qin Yi Ru had addressed Duan Ling Tian earlier. Flee. Of course, Tang Xian did not forget to circulate the Saint Qi he had just accumulated in his body and cast the movement divine ability that the godlike powerhouse had passed to him. This movement divine ability was an evasive movement divine ability. In terms of grade, it was far superior to the movement divine abilities in the mundane realms. It was widely acknowledged as the #1 movement divine ability in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Just as Tang Xian was about to flee, a voice suddenly rang out. Trying to escape? Qin Yi Ru had a look of disdain on his face as he casually waved his hand. An earth-shattering force gushed out like a torrential flood and landed on Tang Xian's body, enveloping him within it. In just a blink of an eye, Qin Yi Ru's energy easily destroyed the saint origin in Tang Xian's body. The movement divine ability that Tang Xian had cast was forcefully disrupted. Suddenly, barf. The interruption of the Saint Qi in his body was undoubtedly a great burden for Tang Xian, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as a sheet of white paper, and his body was on the verge of collapse, as if he could collapse at any moment. Oh, how's this possible? At the same time, waves of shock rose in Tang Xian's heart. After all, even a 3 tribulation bodiless celestial would not be able to stop him from casting his movement divine ability at the critical moment. Unless he's a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial or stronger, it's impossible for him to interrupt me. Tang Xian thought to himself as he looked at the person in front of him in horror. However, before Yang Kai could see the face of this person clearly, he found that as this person raised his hand, an unparalleled force slammed into his body again, not only suppressing his Saint Qi but also binding his entire body. Immediately afterward, Tang Xian felt a wave of dizziness. It was as if he was being restrained by a force. It was extremely uncomfortable. A moment later, Tang Xian felt 2 forces strike the back of his legs, causing his knees to go weak, and he knelt down. At this moment he no longer felt as though he was riding on a cloud, and his vision was clear again. At this moment, Tang Xian discovered that the person in front of him was actually Tang Xian. The energy brought him to kneel in front of Duan Ling Tian. Moreover, it continued to envelop him, causing him to remain kneeling in front of Duan Ling Tian. No matter how hard he struggled, it was to no avail. How is it possible that Duan Ling Tian has a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial by his side? At this moment, Tang Xian was forced to his knees by the force. He could only see Duan Ling Tian's robe and boots. He could not even lift his head to look at Duan Ling Tian. However, this did not stop him from letting out a sound of fear and disbelief in his heart. This. Chapter 2360. Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, was a powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage and was ranked 4th on the Supreme Saint ranking. At this moment, such a person was kneeling in front of Duan Ling Tian like a devout believer worshipping the god he believed in. Upon closer inspection, one would see that Tang Xian was trembling slightly. At this moment, Tang Xian's body was trembling slightly. He was desperately trying to break free from the force that was suppressing him. However, his efforts were to no avail. That power was vast and boundless, like a vast ocean. He was like a lone boat in the middle of the ocean. Once the boat capsized, he would never be able to turn it around again. The people from Zoroastrianism, from the four guardians to the ordinary disciples, had just regained their senses when they saw Tang Xian kneeling before Duanling Tian. This scene seemed calm, but the shock it brought to their eyes was not small at all. What's Lord Sect Leader doing? He's kneeling before Duanling Tian? What's going on? Many of the elders and disciples from Zoroastrianism were stunned when they saw this. Tang Xian was the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. He was a supreme existence in Zoroastrianism. He was like a god in their eyes. However, he was kneeling before a young man. He was as docile as a dog. How could they not be shocked? At this moment, in the eyes of the people from the fire worship sect, Tang Xian's high and mighty image of the sect leader of fire worship sect in the past had crumbled. Sect leader. The four guardians of Zoroastrianism were horrified when they saw Tang Xian kneeling before Duanling Tian. The scene before their eyes shocked them as much as the people from the fire worship sect who were present on the scene. After all, Tang Xian was the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. He was a powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. He was ranked 4th on the Supreme Saint ranking. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Soon after, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism shifted their attention to Duanling Tian. They looked at the old man who had just returned to stand behind Duanling Tian. The old man was none other than the person who had appeared out of thin air in front of the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. At this moment, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism realized that the old man was extremely strong. The old man was much stronger than them. How dare you be so rude to my master? The old man's words echoed in their ears when he appeared in front of the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Master. The master he speaks of is. The guardians of Zoroastrianism turned to Duanling Tian. They narrowed their eyes widened when they saw Duanling Tian. It's impossible for Lord Sect Leader to kneel in front of Guardian Ling Tian willingly. Look at his body, it's still trembling. It's obvious he's struggling. In other words, Lord Sect Leader was forced to kneel in front of Guardian Ling Tian? Even an eminent celestial wouldn't be able to do that, right? After the four guardians of the fire worship sect communicated with each other through voice transmission, the same thought appeared in their minds. The old man behind Duanling Tian was a bodiless celestial. Moreover, he was a bodiless celestial who was stronger than an eminent celestial. He was at least a 3-tribulation bodiless celestial. How could a 3-tribulation bodiless celestial recognize Ling Tian as his master? What happened to Ling Tian during the years he was away? The four guardians of Zoroastrianism were puzzled. Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, was forced to kneel on the ground by Chen Yiru's strength. He struggled with all his might for a while, but when he realized it was impossible for him to break free from the force that was suppressing him, he did not waste any more of his strength. Sir, who are you? Tang Xian took a deep breath and lowered his head as he asked in a deep voice. He was clearly asking Chen Yiru. However, Chen Yiru did not respond to his question. To Chen Yiru, Tang Xian was merely a martial cultivator at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. In Duanling Tian's eyes, Tang Xian was like an ant. Normally, he would not even bother to look at such an existence, so why would he care about his inquiry? Since he asked who you are, you should tell him. At this moment, a faint voice sounded in Chen Yiru's ears again. He was shocked again. He immediately responded respectfully to the purple figure in front of him. Thank you for your help, mister. Yes, master. The faint voice sounded in Chen Yiru's ears. It was none other than Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian looked at Tang Xian who was kneeling in front of him. His eyes were calm and emotionless. If it was a few years ago, he would have been shocked to see Tang Xian kneeling in front of him. After all, Tang Xian was not only the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, but he was also a powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. However, Duanling Tian did not feel anything when he saw Tang Xian kneeling in front of him. The reason for this was naturally because his current strength couldn't be compared to a few years ago. Currently, it would be as easy as stepping on an ant for him to kill Tang Xian. Master. The group of Zoroastrianism members shuddered when they heard Chen Yiru calling Duanling Tian master. They finally realized what was going on. The reason their sect leader of Zoroastrianism was kneeling in front of Duanling Tian was because of the old man who addressed Duanling Tian as master. This was because the old man had appeared in front of their sect leader of Zoroastrianism before. Before they could react, their sect leader of Zoroastrianism was kneeling in front of Duan Lingtian. It was obvious the old man was suppressing him. In other words, after all, the old man was much stronger than their sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Guardian Lingtian, where did such a powerful servant come from? To be able to force Lord Sect Leader to do this old man must be an eminent celestial, right? An eminent celestial? I don't think we've heard of any eminent celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Even if there is one, it's most likely Nye Wu Tian, who's ranked first on the Supreme Saint ranking. Do you mean the old man is Nye Wu Tian? Impossible. I've seen Nye Wu Tian's portrait before. Unless he's disguised himself, there's no way he's Nye Wu Tian. In the eyes of most of the people from Zoroastrianism, an eminent celestial was the peak of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Only the high-ranking officials of Zoroastrianism, including the 4 guardians of Zoroastrianism, realized the old man was not an ordinary person. The old man's cultivation base was definitely not as simple as an eminent celestial. I'm Chen Ru. People call me Chen Sandao. Since Duan Lingtian had spoken, Chen Ru naturally did not dare to be negligent. He looked at Tang Xian, who was kneeling in the air, and said indifferently, Chen Ru, Chen Sandao. Most of the people from Zoroastrianism were confused when they heard Chen Ru's words. Chen Ru? Chen Sandao? I've never heard of him. It seems like this person isn't Nye Wu Tian. He must be a reclusive powerhouse. That's the only explanation. Otherwise, where did such a powerful person come from? While the fire worship sect's members were at a loss, they guessed that Chen Ru was a reclusive expert. However, as soon as Chen Ru finished speaking, Tang Xian narrowed his eyes. Chen Ru? Chen Sandao? Tang Xian's eyes widened as he asked with difficulty, You're Chen Ru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. As the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, although Tang Xian was not very knowledgeable, he knew a thing or two about the Supreme Saint ranking. Yes. Chen Ru responded in a lazy tone. Chen Ru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago? Chen Sandao? It's him. Heavens! Didn't he fail the tribulation more than 4,000 years ago? Why is he here? Doesn't failing the heavenly tribulation mean death? What the hell? What the hell? Could it be that he's an imposter? Many of the people from the fire worship sect present on the scene knew about Chen Ru. When they learned the old man was Chen Ru, they were dumbfounded. Some of them even suspected the old man was impersonating Chen Ru. Otherwise, how could someone who had failed the heavenly tribulation appear here? He failed the heavenly tribulation 4,000 years ago. He's a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. The 4 guardians of Zoroastrianism looked at each other. Although they were mentally prepared, they could still see the shock in each other's eyes. 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. This old man was a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. At the same time, many high-ranking officials of Zoroastrianism who knew about bodiless celestials began to tell the elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism about bodiless celestials. At this moment, the door to a new world appeared in front of the elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism. As it turned out, eminent celestials were not at the peak of the Dao Martial Saint Land. There were bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Those who stood at the peak of the Dao Martial Saint Land were the powerful bodiless celestials. He's a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. He's even stronger than a 3 tribulation bodiless celestial. However, why would he acknowledge Guardian Lingtian as his master? This was the same question in everyone's minds. A 4 tribulation bodiless celestial was extremely arrogant. However, he had acknowledged someone else as his master. Duan Lingtian, I admit defeat. Tang Xian, who was kneeling on the ground, felt as though all his strength had been sapped away. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.